Thanks for joining us, everybody, for AVA-LIVE. We have a very special guest of honor tonight, somebody who is a personal hero of mine. And the thing that I love about Doug Drexler is
Oh, wait, I thought you were talking about me.
Drexler's going to be here. Forget it.
The thing I love about Doug is that you're not just an award-winning makeup artist, an Oscar award-winning makeup artist. You're not just the designer of the NX-01 Enterprise.
Oh, do go on and on.
You are,
and on.
At your core, you are one of us. You are a fan. You are
no
a
doubt about
nerd
that.
and a geek, and you're like me. You're like Sean. You're like this guy over here, Tyler Dunivan. We're all just geeks and nerds, and you have this amazing story that I've been just dying to talk to you about, where you take this journey from literally being the guy breaking into the Star Trek set to being the guy.
I never
on the
broke
Star
into
Trek
the Star Trek set. Why are you telling people this?
So let's start back at the beginning. How did you become a Star Trek fan and a science fiction fan like the rest of us?
Well, I mean, I started off as a reader. I read science fiction, and it was science fiction when I was a kid, but there wasn't a lot of it. I mean, there was almost nothing, and it was not popular at all. If you were into science fiction, you were made fun of when I was a kid. The word geek didn't exist yet. When Star Trek came along, actually, I wasn't even allowed to watch television. At that point. My parents on school nights, I couldn't watch TV. It was not.
Just because you had to get up early and go to school the next day?
Well, it was just they thought that TV was a distraction,
Right.
And I had seen advertisements for the show in print ads and stuff, and it looked really amazing. And friends watched it and said, "This is really different. It's not Lost in Space, and it's not Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea." And I literally went on strike for 1 hour of TV a week. And they finally gave in to me, and I had 1 hour of television, and it was so different from everything else. I knew whoever was behind the show read science fiction novels, and that really affected me. And the show was unlike any. I mean, of course, there was some great science fiction. I mean, there was Twilight Zone, which went between fantasy and sci-fi, and I did love the original Outer Limits,
Oh yes, yeah.
But for the most part, I mean, Irwin Allen dominated television, and although I'm nostalgic about some of it, like Lost in Space, which was goofy as hell, but which at the time was really offensive to me. Star Trek was something entirely different. And I was completely hooked on it. I was a huge fan, and I didn't know too many people who liked it. As a matter of fact, if you dared say that Star Trek was adult science fiction, people would laugh in your face. Mostly people who didn't know anything about science fiction. Well, I mean, the show changed my life. So, hey, kids, television can be good for you. Don't listen to anybody who says that TV is not good for you. It was good for me. As a matter of fact, I remember my father saying to me, if you spend half as much time on your schoolwork as you did on that stupid television show, you'd be okay.
My parents said the same stuff to me, by the way.
My father said that to me, and years later, he went with me to the Academy Awards. So
very cool. So one of your first stops along the way was you owned a science fiction memorabilia store. Is that correct?
Well, it was a Star Trek store.
Oh, okay. It was uniquely Star Trek themed.
Yeah, uniquely Star Trek. It was 1976.
Wow.
Oh my God.
It was 53rd and 3rd in Manhattan, which was
big money today.
I don't know how we did it, but and it was not doing well when we first opened it. And then we saved up enough money to run like a 15-second slide on, I guess, WPIX in New York, or and the next day there was like a line down the street to get in, and it stayed that way for like a year. It was amazing. Paramount didn't think anything of it because Star Trek was just a failed TV show to them. So we never had any hassles with Paramount. It didn't mean anything to them at all.
They didn't know what they had.
You're fine.
Well, and they still don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to know, but they're doing their best. Which Picard, now that season 3, that's like a whole different thing,
Yeah.
Right. Well, I ended up with one of your poster books, which has traveled to so many different residences when I was a kid, because divorced parents, all that stuff. You travel all over, mom, wherever. You're back with dad. You're the corners of that Spock poster with him, with that background, with his console. The corners don't even exist anymore. There's been so many holes put in them with tack.
That
but I still have it.
Amazing poster.
Yeah.
It didn't come from a slide. And of course, there was nothing at the time. I mean, if you were an average person, there was actually nothing you could get as far as Star Trek was concerned. Maybe it was, the making of Star Trek by Stephen E. Whitfield and the AMT model kits. But there wasn't really. The tech manual was on the verge of coming out, but it was not. There was no merchandising at all. And a guy named Alan Asherman, who we knew and was like the foremost collector of Star Trek stuff, who lived in New York. He because of the Federation Trading Post, he would come in. We became great friends, and he had actual studio transparencies. That Spock poster came from a transparency that was about that big, and that's why when you look at that poster, you could even see the weaving, like in his pants. I mean, the clarity. That probably was one of the most amazing posters we ever ran.
Wow,
it's amazing.
So you open this store, and you have very little to sell. How did it end up working out?
Well, we made everything ourselves. We printed our own posters.
Wow.
We made our own slides. Back then there was no internet, but there were plenty of fanzines. Fanzines meant that you actually either remember mimeographing? you either mimeographed them or you print. I don't think, was Xerox even a thing yet?
I don't think so,
really good.
We used to have people send us their fanzines from all over the country, and we used to sell them in the store, and that was like the fan internet, really.
So those were basically kind of like the fan films of their day, essentially, in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of fan fiction
in them and stuff like that.
Published in them. Yeah, I guess you could say that. It was really interesting. I read an article. There was an article in the New York Times years and years ago about an influx of female science fiction writers.
Like Leslie Sawyer.
Like, I don't know if it was the early 80s and they traced it back to Star Trek fan fiction.
Well, that term, I'm sure but like that term, Mary Sue, comes from Star Trek fan fiction.
Mary Sue, I never heard the term Mary Sue.
Lieutenant Mary Sue, 15 and a half years old.
What's that from?
I don't remember which one it was from, but I've heard that's where that particular term, a Mary Sue, comes
from. Well, where is the term from? I never heard that.
It's supposedly from a Star Trek fan fiction that somebody did, and it gets used a lot today for like characters that
really
are perfect.
You pulled a Mary Sue.
So So yeah, it's amazing how far back Star Trek fan fiction goes. I think even the very first Star Trek fan films were made in the 70s, on film, like Paragon's Paragon and that sort of thing.
Paragon.
Yeah, it was a real early, I think it's maybe 77 or something like that, but it was a shot on film. Guys built their own sets. You could barely hear the audio, but it was like the very early age of Star Trek fan films in the 70s.
So how did
I
they
have a
distribute
Turkish
those?
Star Trek fan film from something. I'll have to send it to you. It's from like the 70s. It's like a Turkish Star Trek fan film.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
I know what you're
seen
talking
that.
about. Yeah.
That was from the 70s?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that.
Late 70s, early 80s, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, how do you distribute something like that?
I don't know how they did it back then.
There's
I
no
don't.
internet. How are people gonna see it?
I
I
think
think it got
people.
to conventions on like VHS or even Super 8, and they were just selling it.
Oh, well, maybe they were selling it. I mean, I was at the very first Star Trek convention.
Oh really?
City in,
What
like,
was that like?
72 or something. It was across from Penn Station. I can't remember the name of the hotel anymore. Right across from Penn Station. They only expected a few hundred people, and like a couple of thousand showed up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was there with that. Anthony Fredrickson and I went, who ended up a graphic artist on the show. We grew up together. And I remember he made based on the making of Star Trek, he made a phaser, the hand phaser.
Yeah.
He made one out of balsa wood and painted it, and it had the grill on the top was hand drawn with a pen, and I remember we're waiting in line to go in, and he took that out and almost caused a riot. There was nothing. There was literally nothing available. So to see something like that was,
Yeah.
amazing.
I've seen some like film of that first convention, and like the start. Some of the Star Trek actors come out: Nimoy, George Takei, James Doohan, and the whole place just went bananas. Is that kind of how you remember it?
Well, I remember that Nimoy wasn't an official guest. He showed up out of nowhere. He heard about it and he came down and caused a big ruckus. Gene Roddenberry was there. As a matter of fact, it was the first time I ever saw the blooper reel. And Gene ran the projector, which is really amazing, yeah, I mean, there was nothing like it. There was no Federation trading post at that time. I mean, it was even less than nothing, if there is such a thing.
So there is this kind of wild story that you visited the set of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Tell us that story.
Well, I mean, it was like they were doing Star Trek again, which was impossible. And Jeff Mandel, who was a graphic designer on, I got him his first job on Deep Space Nine as a graphic designer. And he was on Picard with us doing graphics. And we just decided to go out to Los Angeles and try to get on the back lot. We had no idea whether we'd get on or not, And it was so stupid. We circled the studio looking for holes in the fence. And any car that was parked there that we thought maybe belonged to someone who worked at the studio, we'd leave a note on begging them to get us in like they could,
Right.
Although security was really much different.
Different times
than it was, like after 9/11, where they really ramped up things, But we managed to get on the lot. I got an invite. I called Howard Anderson, who was on the back lot, and they got us a pass on. And Jeff got an invitation from Lee Cole, who was a graphic designer on Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And we went in, and I remember Lee was great. I mean, she wrote me a recommendation on this. I ended up working with her on Enterprise. And she wrote me an invitation. Not an invitation, a recommendation on the spot. Lee Cole from the Star Trek art department, And after she was done talking to us, and of course the Star Trek art department was in the same place that the Next Gen art department and Voyager art department was until the very end. And
Wow.
if you watch Sunset Boulevard, where uh, what's her name drives to the studio in her Duesenberg or whatever it is, and Cecil B. DeMille, you can see where the writer's room was in the movie. Up there is where the Star Trek art department was.
Hmm.
It was a historic place. But
there was some other story too about like in the first season of Next Gen where some guys broke into the set
oh
and they
yeah,
took
well,
a
there's a
bunch of
video
photos
on
and
YouTube.
videos.
That knucklehead. I mean, it was absurd. I mean, I understand being a fan, but because I am. I
Yeah.
don't think I'd ever do anything like that. It was people like that made it tough on fans.
Right.
You know, when they do things like that, the studio is concerned.
Yeah.
When you're doing stuff like breaking in, and that was a mistake on their part. I know the guy. I haven't seen him in years. But it was like absurd. I mean, they broke stuff, and
Yeah, they broke like the sick bay
well, there's a scene where
bio
he's
bed.
trying to get in the clamshell, diagnostic bed, and the whole thing goes over. And he's wearing a uniform. It's embarrassing.
So you had that experience of going on the set. Did you get to see anything? Did you get to see like behind the scenes filming? Did you get to?
No, I mean, we weren't really allowed on stage.
Okay.
We were in the art department, which Harold Michelson was a production designer who ended up being a friend of mine, I think Tracy. And we ran into Mike Miner. I don't know if you remember Mike Miner. I think he was an art director in Star Trek Motion Picture, not production designer, art director. Yeah. And he was a geeky fan, and he recognized us as kindred spirits. And he said, "I'll take you around." And we didn't see a lot of major stuff, but I mean, we went in and were able to catch a glimpse of the bridge and the airlock that Spock goes out of, and stuff like that. And so he was always a hero of ours. I think that after we did that, we did a fanzine called Fandom Triumphs that I think you could still get, like on eBay or something. And I look, now, if someone goes on the internet, they could spread a rumor or information far and wide and really mess things up. Back then, if you did a fanzine, very few people would see it, But we did a fanzine that like gave away stuff, that we saw in the art department, and that was really wrong for us to do that. But we didn't understand. And frankly, how many people are going to see this? Maybe 100 people. Today, it's a whole different thing. I mean, tens of thousands can see stuff.
You had to really keep season 3 of Star Trek Picard under wraps.
Well, it's amazing how well it was kept under wraps, considering.
Yeah.
So many people had no idea about the D bridge. That was a massive secret. I know that a few people leaked it, but someone like Dave Blass would contact them and beg them to take it down. So people were pretty cooperative. But yeah, I mean, I was amazed at how well the secret was kept. How did that happen? I don't know.
So, okay, so we start here with your story. You're a fan. It's the 1 hour you get to watch of TV a week. You start like an original thing in the 70s with this Star Trek store. You go see the set. So, back in the day, and you still are, but you're just like any of us. And it's like, boom, you make this amazing journey. How did you get to this moment? How did you get to this moment that so few people are able to get to?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, of course, it's always a matter of stick-to-itiveness and never giving in, and believing in yourself and doing visualization. I did a lot of visualization. When I was going to bed, I put myself into a hypnotic state and visualized myself getting an award. That was my visualization. I do it every night. And it's like it worked.
You set a goal and you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at it every day so that if an opportunity came up, I'd be ready for it, drawing and stuff like that. I got into makeup. I became interested in makeup, and I did a makeup for a Halloween party. Back then, in order to learn how to do makeup, you could go on the internet now. I'm telling you, if you can't get into the business today, you're doing something wrong, because it's so easy to meet people. Because that's the number one thing, meeting people who are art directors or visual effects people or writers. Or back then, how the hell are you going to meet anyone like that? It's almost impossible. Now it's like, and as far as information, you can go on the internet and type in life casting and get like 10,000 videos that show you how to do it. There was nothing like that then. And we had to walk through the snow 6 feet deep to get to school. And
Both ways.
It's that old story. I mean, I got an invitation to a Halloween party, and I had been collecting articles on visual effects. And in those days, you had to either collect underground publications, like I think Cinemagic was like a fanzine back then before it became a actual magazine. And I collected articles, and I had an article on how to do prosthetic character makeup and Cinemagic. And I knew I had enough information to give it a shot. And I'd never sculpted before. I didn't know I could. I mean, I drew, but I found out that because I drew, I was able to sculpt. And I did a Planet of the Apes makeup. And boy, that was it for me. It was so magical. I mean, it really is mind-blowing the first time you do a prosthetic makeup, that I just couldn't stop. I was obsessed with it. And I mean, I was making molds was fun. I mean, if the cat would stand still, I'd make a mold on the cat. But a friend of mine who wrote articles for film magazines, I showed him some of the stuff I was doing, and he said, I just interviewed Dick Smith, who's the greatest makeup artist who ever lived, in my opinion, and who I didn't know lived just north of New York City. And he said, look, I'm going to give you his telephone number. You should give him a call. And it actually took me a couple of weeks to build up the courage to call him. And when I did, he kept me on the phone, giving me information. It's really incredible. And, back then, either you spoke on the phone or you wrote letters. And about 3 months later, he asked me if I was available to be an assistant on The Hunger, which was a Tony Scott, who did the first Top Gun, and was the director. And it had David Bowie in it, and Catherine Deneuve, and Susan Sarandon. But as far as makeup goes, you could not have started on a better movie, because there were like 6 stages of old age makeup for David Bowie, and there were crumbling mummy effects and mummy suits and puppet heads. And so I was on that for like 6 months. And after that, it was just, my career just kept going from that point. I met a guy named John Caglione, who was a makeup artist, and he was mostly doing Saturday Night Live at the time of the original Not Ready for Primetime Players at Rockefeller Center. And we just hit it off. We had a similar sense of humor, and it was lots of fun. And I think the first picture I worked on with him was Amityville 3, which was in Mexico City. They were shooting it. It was like, are you willing to go to Mexico City? I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. And that was the beginning of my makeup career, really. John and I became partners after that. And we had a lab in Brooklyn. And Dick Smith would feed us jobs, but I just remember sitting in the lab one day and reading Variety, and there was an article saying that Warren Beatty was going to do Dick Tracy. And of course, I grew up reading Dick Tracy. It was one of the most bizarre. It was nothing like a movie. It was like the movie, as far as I was concerned, was that showed me that Warren Beatty really didn't know anything about Dick Tracy. I mean, if you read Dick Tracy, it was one of the most bizarre, offbeat, crazy, forward-thinking, nutty. I mean, Warren's Dick Tracy was just like a guy with weird villains with weird faces doing gangbuster stuff. If you read Chester Gould's Dick Tracy, it was nuts. So, but there were all these wonderful faces, and I remember we looked at each other and said, "Wow, whoever gets that job is going to get the statue." You know, sight unseen. I mean, I knew that it was like Fort Knox of faces, but there was no way we were going to get that job, not in a million years, because there were guys like Rick Baker, who was a big name, and Greg Canham, and Rob Bottin, and Stan Winston, and well, I know we were out. We had worked with a guy who was a producer on it named John Landau, and we had done a number of jobs with him, like FX and Making Mr. Right and Manhunter and stuff like that. And we had also worked with production designer Dick Silbert, who is one of the all-time greats, and Milena Cananero, who was a costume designer on Cotton Club. And when they were working with Warren, they said, "Why don't you give these guys a try?" And we had a meeting with him at his house.
Oh, wow.
Mulholland Drive. And, you know, I guess that he liked the fact that we weren't too big for our britches. You know, you bring in people like Rick Baker. I'm not, you know, Rick, if you're listening, I'm not saying you're too big for your britches, even though I really think you were too big for your britches. But we had a meeting with him, and the next thing I knew, we had the job. And I think that Warren just liked our attitude better than anyone else he spoke to. And he also had all these people on the show who were like rooting for us to get it. And next thing I knew, we had Dick Tracy. We knew we wanted to come to LA, but we didn't want to come here looking for a job. We wanted there to be a job waiting for us.
Wow.
And when that happened, I mean, they basically got us out here and found us a place to live. And, you know, we were on like the biggest job in town. And it just happened to be at the same time season 2 of Next Generation was shooting. While we were in Brooklyn, before they even started shooting season 1, I was losing it because, oh my God, they're doing Star Trek again. And this time it's Gene Roddenberry and Bob Justman, which to me, that's like a thoroughbred. And I remember that John said to me, "Well, look, Doug, why don't you just call Bob at Paramount?" And I'm thinking, I can't call Bob. Well, wait a minute. Why can't I call Bob Justman? I'm in the business.
Yeah.
And I got right on the phone and I called Paramount and got the switchboard and asked for Bob Justman in the Star Trek production office. And he put me right through. And I had Bob Justman on the phone.
Wow.
And he invited, I went out twice before the show ever premiered. I spent an entire day with Bob on the back lot. And, you know, he was just an awesome guy. And the trouble is that, you know, I was doing makeup and there was an East Coast union and a West Coast union. And if you were in the East Coast union, working on the West Coast was almost impossible.
Yeah.
But we ended up, once we came out here and we were on Dick Tracy, and we were not in the West Coast Union. I remember Dick Smith, who originally said, "Well, you guys will never get it. It'll be Rick Baker or something." And then when we got it, he said, "Well, maybe you got the job, but you guys will never work on the set because you're not in the West Coast Union. And Howard Smith, the president of the union, is a real bear, and he'll never let you." But Dick was underestimating the power of Warren Beatty, who was super powerful in so many ways back then. And Warren hadn't decided whether or not Dick Tracy was even going to be a union job. And so he was negotiating with the unions, and he said, "Well, look, I think maybe we'll do Dick Tracy as a union job, but I need these 2 guys." So basically, Warren got us into the union. We still had to take a test. They even made Dick Smith take his test. And next thing I knew, not only were we invited into the union, but Howard Smith personally drove our applications to our lab in Van Nuys and handed them to us like this.
Oh my God.
It was crazy. I mean, I've had so many amazing breaks. And, you know, they were doing season 2 of Next Generation, and being on Star Trek was always what it was all about for me.
You posted this photo the other day, and it's something you drew back in the day. You got on Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? From working on Dick Tracy?
Yeah, I went directly from Dick Tracy to I admit the first few times I went out to visit Bob, I met Mike Westmore. And then when we did Dick Tracy, as soon as Dick Tracy was done, I literally went to Paramount and begged Mike to let me work on Star Trek. And he was like, "You're doing features and, you did this big picture. I mean, why?" And I was like, "This is what it's all about for me. This is where I want to be." And as a matter of fact, we just talked about this, me and Mike Westmore, a couple of weeks ago. I remember him, we were with a bunch of people having dinner, and he said, "Well, it was really a no-brainer to hire you," which is great to hear all those years later.
What's the story behind this photo here? This is a really important, I guess, part of that.
Well, I mean, you spend a lot of time just, there's moments of really hard work and terror while you're working on a show like this. And then there's a lot of moments where you're just waiting. It's like the Army, hurry up and wait. And so when they're setting up things and setting up lights and getting ready to shoot and doing rehearsals, you've got a lot of time to just sit and watch. And I used to put my makeup kit right next to the door to Picard's ready room and just sit on there. And actually, this is one of the very few on-the-spot drawings that I did, because once you start sketching, it attracts people. They come over and they want to see what you're doing. And it was like, that was too much attention. I didn't want that much attention. So this is one of the few on-the-spot drawings that I did. And I think it was an episode called Conundrum. And so that was drawn like as it was happening right there.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I wanted to say something. Your makeup though for Dick Tracy, it stands up today. It's unbelievably good looking stuff. It's not something that you look at and go, "Oh, okay, that's old makeup, old whatever." I mean, when you watch Dick Tracy again today at either TCM events or different things around when they have it on the big screen, it's still amazing to look at.
Well,
the actors could act through it. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you. The technology in makeup really hadn't changed much from The Wizard of Oz by the time we did Dick Tracy. It was just basic, foam latex appliances and stuff like that. What made it great was the spirit and the heart that the people had who were doing it. You could give the same tools to somebody else who doesn't have the same heart, and the makeups won't look good.
Right.
One of the things that's really different today is that, well, first of all, there's a lot of makeup that's being taken over by CG. You could de-age people, which is amazing. One thing in particular is that you could fix bad makeups using CG.
Oh, wow.
Well, if you look at early episodes of Next Generation, you could clearly see the edges on Michael Dorn's makeups. Even in standard def, you could go in and fix that in the computer. It's easy. I'm not saying, it's pretty easy to go in and blend out edges and stuff like that using the computer.
Denise Crosby had some shots where hers was kind of rough.
Denise
Maybe
Crosby?
like a little. There were a few times where she had like too much powder on or something.
Oh well,
because of the
boy, you're really being picky.
I'm just saying, I noticed it, but it's you like you said, you could probably do things differently today. But we don't use as powerful lights in things like that today as they did back then either.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like the lights were, overblown or anything. I'm talking about, sometimes you'll have some shine on Captain Picard's head, but I mean, it's like, that's not such a big deal. When you've got edges that are showing on appliances, that's something else,
So Keith Hamilton, he's one of our CG artists on our fan films. He wants to know about applying makeup on John Delancey while he was not clothed.
Oh, yeah. That was, that was hilarious. I was in the lab, and Mike Westmore says that the union doesn't have any. They actually have body makeup artists for people who are they go in and they just do bodies. And if they don't have someone, Mike can elect somebody else to go do it. And I thought I was going to get to put makeup on some gorgeous, gal or something. And it turns out it's John Delancey. He gave me a pancake which is, it's a dry makeup, like, and you take a wet sponge and you pick up the makeup on the wet sponge and you put it on the person just to blend off, like, you know, if they have imperfections on their skin and stuff like that. And he wanted me to go to Delancey's trailer and do them. And he was on the phone arguing with somebody. I went in, and the whole time I did it, he hardly paid attention to me. He just waves me in, and he drops the, you know, his like a robe, and I'm doing them from head to toe. And, you know, it feels like a Saint Bernard's licking you, you know. But I did this whole, you know, body makeup on him, and then he was called to stage, and I remember going into the stage with him. Going to stage, you know, you've got that bright California sun. It was hot as hell, and you open that door, like a vault door, and it's like ice cold on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the back wall is off Picard's ready room, so we cross through Picard's ready room, go onto the bridge. And he's wearing like a modesty G-string. He's not completely naked, but pretty much. And he's still not even aware of anything because he's running his lines through his head. And I look over, and the director of the episode is Les Landau.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew Les because his brother John was a producer on Dick Tracy. And we had won the Academy Award by this time. And I took a lot of ribbing. You know, I mean, everyone loved that I was there and I just won an Academy Award, you know. LeVar, every time he would see me, you know, on stage, he would stop everything and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Academy Award-winning makeup artist, Doug Drexler." And I actually got to the point where it was embarrassing. I'd be embarrassed. There was one time where I was walking down the street in Studio City, and some guy comes running around the corner and runs right into me. Bam. And I look, and it's LeVar. And he looks at me, and he turns to the entire street in Studio City and says, "Ladies and gentlemen." So I think Les had seen this before. And when I came onto stage, LeVar did it again.
Oh, my gosh.
And so there's Delancey, like buck naked. And I look over at Les Landau, and I can see that the twinkle in his eye that I'm about to be given a hard time. And he walks over to Delancey and points to a spot on his butt, naked butt, and yells, "Makeup!" And so I go over with a cake in front of the crew. I'm like putting pancake on Delancey's butt cheek. And while I'm doing that, Les Landau turns to the crew and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, Academy Award-winning makeup artist, Doug Drexler." Hilarious. I mean, it was probably one of the most fun set casts I've ever worked with. You know, and there's nothing. If you're a makeup artist, you live with the actors and you live on stage. You know, yeah. I mean, I was a makeup artist when that picture was taken, and I was one of the. You know, I was always warned about being too much of a fan on stage because, like that guy who broke into the set and took images, you know, video, it was not a good thing to be known as a big geek because you couldn't be trusted. You know, fans had come in and, you know, stolen stuff and disrupted things. But I had just come off of Dick Tracy, one of the biggest shows in Hollywood, working with Warren Beatty and every major actor in Hollywood, and I didn't care.
Madonna. Yeah.
You know, so I made no bones about the fact that I was a huge fan of the show. All the actors knew it, you know. I mean, when I went, you know, I mean, I knew that Michael Cuda always warned me about being a fan on stage. But it was like, come on, man, I just got done with Warren Beatty, you know.
And you did such
and
great
Al Pacino and Dustin Hoffman and all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first episodes I worked on. This one.
I have like a bunch of fan edits of this episode where I've re-edited it a bunch of times and made it silly, like where Riker incriminates himself, and this is one of my favorite episodes.
You know, I took 2 original series episodes. I took a piece of the action and which was directed by a guy who was a stand-up comic who became a director, James Comack. who ended up doing shows like Barney Miller and Welcome Back, Kotter. And they were smart to hire a guy who knew how to do comedy. But I took that show, Piece of the Action, I put a laugh track on it. And it was awesome. It worked so beautifully. And then the other thing I did was I took Spock's Brain, which most people recognize as one of the worst shows that they did. If you put a laugh track on that show, it becomes one of the greatest shows you've ever seen. So I had done that, you know. Yeah, now that was the first thing I ever did on Patrick Stewart. And, you know, even though I had done a big picture and done pictures with big actors and stuff, doing a makeup on Patrick was like mind-boggling to me. You know, Mike Westmore made the appliances and designed the makeup, and I just, you know, I had a whole day with Patrick, and he loved the makeup. He was delighted with it, and he was, you know, sneaking up on people. They didn't know who the hell he was, and, you know. But I remember that after I took the makeup off of him, Mike Westmore says they're going to shoot some green screen of him, where they're going to, I guess it's a scene where he fades in and out of whether it was this sequence or not. And it was surrealistic to me because here's Patrick Stewart in his uniform, and I'm, you know, just taking the shine off him or something like that. And it's like Captain Picard telling me what a wonderful job I did. I felt like a crewman, you know. It was really mind-boggling. I had willed myself onto Star Trek somehow, you know, and even got to the point like today where, Jesus, I go on the internet, it says, Star Trek legend, Doug Drexler. How did this ever happen? You know.
Well, because you partially willed, along with other people, you were one of the preeminent people when you opened up your little store and all that stuff. You helped will it back into existence. People like you didn't let it die.
No, that's really true. I mean, back then fandom was very different. Although Picard season 3 has kind of brought fans back together again. I have not seen fans almost universally agree about anything in decades. As a matter of fact, since JJ took over, the knives have been out on both sides. You know, I mean, people fighting and arguing, and there was no peace, you know. And then when I got onto Picard season 2, I knew that changes were in the wind with Terry Metalis there, who I've known Terry for like 25 years. He was an assistant, and it's like a PA almost on Voyager and Enterprise. And he hung out in the art department because the art department was a cool place to be, you know. It was. And because we were all geeks, and we also were the keepers of the technology in the art department, you know, with Michael Cuda. And Jesus Christ, Terry Metalis ends up being showrunner on Picard. So season 2
wasn't a dry eye in the house. Yeah.
Well, I cried through almost every episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I cried, I laughed, I was thrilled, and I read every script. I knew everything that was going to happen, but I was so moved by it. It was very emotional for me. I mean, also because for about 2 decades, if you were, you know, we talk about Star Trek legacy. If you were a legacy worker, someone who worked on like almost 2 decades of Star Trek, they didn't want you on the new shows because if you knew too much about Star Trek, they didn't want you on the show.
Oh man!
Because you'll get people who, and I totally get it, they don't want to come in and do what they would consider the same old thing. We're going to reinvent it. We're going to revitalize it. We're going to fix it. And I'm going to put my own mark on it. So they really don't want people who are going to say, well, that's not completely right. And they don't want to, to them, that's like, I mean, look, even Rick Berman back on the old shows, Gene Roddenberry wanted an encyclopedia to put all the facts together. But, you know, Berman had said numerous times that the encyclopedia created issues, you know, because it set up rules. And so when the new group of Star Trek shows and movies happened, they didn't want that either. It made it more difficult to write stories when you, I mean, look, if you're doing, you know, a story about Pearl Harbor, you know, a real history thing, you've got to follow the rules. You know, the aircraft carriers have to be correct. The uniforms have to be correct. You know, you can't decide that Japanese Zeros aren't exciting enough and give them, you know, F-14s. If you're doing Star Trek, you might have a producer who's like, well, it's science fiction. We can do whatever we want, you know. But Star Trek really, for me, was always a period piece. And you don't go messing with that. It's all it's in stone. You know, I mean, I think that you could go in and do that, do the show, and change some stuff. Like, I mean, if I was going to do, you know, we did Trials and Tribulations, and we did the mirror episodes on Enterprise where we recreated the original ship, and we were faithful to it. But I think it's okay to take those designs, and as long as you're clever about it and exciting, you can smooth things out and sleek them up a little bit. I mean, we did it a little bit on the Defiant Bridge where I'm on here. Herman and Manny Kodo said, well, it isn't the Enterprise. If it was the Enterprise, we would want it to be exactly the same. But since it's not the Enterprise, there were a few things that Herman did, you know, like the railing is not segmented. It's perfectly round. I mean, it makes so little difference. No one really even notices it. I've never heard anybody complain about the rail being perfectly round. But I mean, I wouldn't mind. I mean, they've tried to do it on Strange New Worlds, and some of that bridge design I like, but there's other things that don't make any sense to me. To me buck aircraft logic, which to me is the best Star Trek, because you had Matt Jeffries and Bob and Gene Roddenberry. You know, Matt was the art director, and Gene. You know, I mean, those guys were aviators. You know, Gene flew B-17s during World War II, and Matt Jeffries was a flight engineer on a B-17. So as far out as things might get, there was still aircraft logic going on. I see a lot of science fiction, and sometimes in these new shows where they do science fiction designs. They don't do aircraft logic designs. And it looks like science fiction to me, you know, that you can't understand the reasoning of why they would do something a certain way because it's sci-fi. So the rules don't apply. And Gene always said, even in the earliest writer's guide, that the same rules apply to Star Trek as any other drama. You know, once you start making bending things because it's science fiction, now you're getting into issues. You know, I mean, I work on
fantasy. It becomes magic.
What's that?
Yeah, like the new turbo. Like the new turbo that's going the new turbo that's going into other dimensions and weird stuff like that and craziness and.
Well, I mean, I remember I think it was on Discovery, which I didn't watch Discovery.
Yeah.
But when they would really break the rules, people would send me clips and go, "Oh my God, look what they did!" Like there was a scene with like a turbo lift flying through a giant.
Yeah.
What? I mean, see, that's what I mean. That's the science fiction design. How does that make any sense? Why do you have a big open area, you know, on a starship that turbo lifts are flying through? I mean, it makes no sense at all.
So let's talk about your transition to the art department. How did that happen? You know, you've got this great makeup career going on, and then you moved to the art department. I was tired of
makeup by that point. I really was. I mean,
no more rubber noses.
Well, there's always interesting makeups, but for me, I don't know how you be a makeup artist for 40 years. And all my makeup artist friends from back then are still makeup artists. And it's like, I could see loving this, and I applaud you, but it's like, really? With all the other cool things going on, this is all you want to do? You know, once I got out here and working on a show that would go and go and go, I was friends with the visual effects department. I was friends with the makeup department. I was friends with the art department. You know, I was like, there's no way I'm just going to be a makeup artist. It's crazy. I mean, well, first of all, I think I belonged in the art department from the very beginning. You know, makeup was a way to get there. But I ran into Michael Cuda on stage early on TNG. And, I think I gushed a little bit over him. I think he was a little embarrassed.
I did the same thing about 2 years ago at STLV. And there was I had met Denise Crosby. I'd met Rod Roddenberry. I'd shown Rod one of our fan films. And when I saw Michael Cuda, I tripped. I was like, "That's Michael Cuda," and I tripped and I hit my head. And I got
I thought you meant LSD.
no, at Star Trek Las Vegas, and I walked up to him and I started talking to him. And I was so fanboying out over him that Denise had to be like, "All right, guy, back up a little bit." You know what I mean? Because I was like, "It's really him. It's Michael Cuda."
Mike is great with the fans, and he's a fan himself, and so is Denise. I mean, as a matter of fact, just about everybody in that picture was a big geek. The art department was a center of geekdom. I met Mike on stage, and I spent a lot of time on those sets. I mean, lots and lots of hours on those stages, and got to look at those sets close up. And the thing about them was that for the first time, I could look at those backlit graphics and stuff and see everything. And I was like, wow, this is not just cool, but whoever this guy is, I knew who he was, that he really takes this seriously. The closer you look at it, the more in depth it became, and all actually had serious thought put into it. And I just knew I wanted to be in the art department. And then one day I was walking through the corridors of the ship. There was no one else there. And I ran into Mike. And I said, "Say, Mike, I mean, what's the chances of ever getting in the art department?" I remember him looking over this way, looking over that way, because you don't want to get too geeky if there are people around. And he grabbed me by the arm and dragged me down the corridor to the, there were those big holodeck doors, which one of the holodeck led to Hangar Bay 3. He pulls it open, and the Hangar Bay 3 was almost complete. I mean, there wasn't a ceiling. But when you were in there, that was the thing about those sets. You were on the ship, and he opens the door, and I think it was the episode, can't remember what episode it was, but they had that really cool shuttle that they had rebuilt from Star Trek V. They took it and they cut it down, and it was much better than it was in Star Trek V. And it was complete inside and out. And there was the whole back hatch is open, and all the panels are lit and blinking. And Mike and I go in there. He sits in the pilot seat, and I sit in the co-pilot seat. And basically, we were hiding from people to talk about this.
Sounds like 2001: Space Odyssey.
Well, that's what I said. We had this conversation, and he was explaining how, well, it's not that easy to get into the art department, and there are no positions at this point, And I realized, I go, Mike, you realize we're doing a scene here from 2001 where they're hiding from Hal. And he burst out laughing, and I burst out laughing. And I think that's where Mike and I really bonded in that moment there. And I guess it was 5th season? Or
yeah,
6th?
I think it would have been The Outcast would have been the episode.
Really? What makes you say that?
Because it was either that or no, it would have been Darmok. Might have been Darmok.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because that's the first episode.
What season was it?
5.
Yeah, I was still doing makeup by season 5. But I guess I almost ended up in the TNG art department, but the person who was leaving got cold feet. But it was Deep Space Nine where I finally made it into the art department. And Mike brought me in. That was for Trials and Tribulations. That was crazy. I mean, when we did that, first of all, we knew we were going to do one of two things for that anniversary. They had an idea for going back to Piece of the Action, Iosha. They're very imitative. That they go back and now everyone's walking around in Starfleet uniforms. It's like a big convention because they're imitative,
Yeah.
Or they were going to go back to Tribbles and kind of do a thing where they would gump people. They called it gumping because Forrest Gump was like the first movie where they were really putting Tom Hanks into footage and stuff. And I think that they thought that was going to be too difficult to do that. And Gary Hutzel, the visual effects supervisor, who he and I ended up being practically partners later on, he took a piece of footage from the original series and he gumped somebody, one of his guys, into a scene on the bridge. And he took that and showed it to the writers, and that's what sold it to them that it could be done. Although the funny thing is that he came into the art department and said, "Here, I want to show you something." And he put the footage, he put a VHS tape in and had that sequence playing. And the thing was that Mike, Denise, and I know every Star Trek frame. And we knew this guy wasn't part of the show instantly. But we didn't act like it. We were like, "I don't see anything different." Because we didn't want to hurt his feelings. But it was perfectly done. It was just that he had the wrong stance. We never saw him before. The uniform wasn't quite right. We knew instantly. The writers would never know because they're not into it as like we were. A lot of them were fans, but we were really visually oriented, you know. And so all of a sudden we were recreating those sets, which you got to remember that back then you couldn't just go on the internet and find 10,000 pictures of almost anything.
Yeah.
It was whatever I saved as a kid. You know, I had boxes of pictures and magazine articles I clipped and had been collecting slides from Lincoln Enterprises and we did have VHS tapes, which we were able to do really primitive frame grabs off of and print out like a Polaroid. They were really bad, not good resolution at all. And we're able to, you know, recreate the sets. As far as blueprints, there was almost nothing available. I mean, now you can find a lot of blueprints on the internet. But back then, Paramount had nothing, you know. I mean, even when we did Picard, we had to recreate the D bridge. Paramount had some stuff, but I just happened to have a complete set of the D blueprints in my garage. The last week of Enterprise, Fritz Zimmerman asked if I wanted anything, you know, and I said, "Yeah, I'd like a complete set of the D bridge." And so, you know, I think that when we were doing Trials and Tribulations, I'm sure I said, you know, we might be recreating one of these sets we're working on, you know, Next Generation years from now, and we all laughed, you know. It ended up really happening.
Did you ever think that you would get to design?
No. It's impossible. How could that ever happen? When Deep Space Nine was coming to an end, there was no room for me to go over to Voyager. They had, even though I did stuff for Voyager, they had a complete staff, and I knew the visual effects guys really well, and I knew that they had been transitioning to CG. So I knew what program they were using. And about 3 months before DS9 ended, I had kind of gotten my feet wet doing CG at a time when nobody was doing it, you know. And Foundation Imaging, Ron Thornton's company, had started doing CG shots of the Voyager. You know, I mean, the story was that Ron was trying to do stuff for Star Trek. And Rick Berman and Peter Lortzen, I guess, said, well, we're not throwing away our stock footage. On the day where you can do a shot that we could put next to our stock footage and it works, then we'll consider using CG, which they eventually did. And so I remember my wife, Dorothy, I told her that I wanted to try to get in there at Foundation Imaging. And she says, I'm old friends with Ron Thornton. Didn't you know that? And I'm like,
oh,
what?
Wow.
What? She says, sure, I'll call him tomorrow. And I went up. He was excited to meet me. And, you know, I mean, I was well known already at that point for Star Trek. And they hired me like on the spot. And I was a, you know, novice, really. But, you know, it was like me going to the Hunger with Dick Smith. Now I was among all of these CG artists. And I really started to learn. So I worked at Foundation Imaging on Voyager for almost 2 years, although I did other stuff at Foundation, other shows. And when Enterprise happened, I didn't really want to go back to Star Trek as a graphic artist. Mike would have brought me back, but I didn't want to. It was like I felt like I did that for 7 years on Deep Space Nine. So I was going to stay at Foundation. But when they started trying to design the ship, and they had John Eves, who's great, but I think John had done like 30 different designs for the NX, and they were all rejected. That's pretty normal for a Hollywood. Often they'll just have you keep doing new designs till there's no more time, because you've got people who aren't visual. And the thing you hear most often is, well, we don't really know what we want, but we'll know it when we see it. So they'll keep you doing it and doing it and doing it. And they got to the point where Herman had to get on to other sets. And Michael Cuda said, well, why don't you bring Doug back with all the CG stuff he knows now? And we could work on the ship in the art department. And it was really a first. I mean, I don't think that ships anything like that had been designed in an art department of CG before. Maybe in a movie or something, but it was unheard of on television. And I remember, Herman invited me back, and I'm like, well, Herman, I can't start tomorrow because I'm at Foundation Imaging. I go, I have to give them 2 weeks notice. And he said, oh, that's okay. I'll come to your house after work. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I'm going to spend all day working, and I'd come home and Herman would be sitting on the front porch waiting for me. He'd sit behind me on the computer.
It's a nice front porch. I know that porch.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I was very happy to be on the show doing this, but it just seemed, to spend a whole day at Foundation and then come home and have Herman waiting there, which was fantastic, but long hours and you get tired. So after 2 weeks, I moved back into the art department and started doing designs, which before it would be done with pencils and markers and paper and stuff, and which you could have someone do that, but it's not like doing it in CG where I could do a design and I could show it to them in any kind of light instantly. I could do a turntable and spin it. I could fly it by the camera. That. And Herman would go over to Rick Berman's office with a VHS tape with flybys, and he couldn't. To him, it was like showing off. So it was a great opportunity for me. I was still a novice,
and yet you created an iconic design.
Well, a lot of people hated it. I mean,
I loved it.
They hate everything that's new. They hated the Enterprise D when they first saw it. They hated Jean-Luc Picard when the show first premiered. Oh, he surrendered, and he, it can really be tough. I took a lot of abuse online over the NX because a lot of people thought it was it looks like the Akira, which, come on, it's like crazy. Put it next to the Akira. The only thing that it really is the same as I've got the pylons that come off the saucer. Some of the abuse, first, it was the first show where there was an internet, and you'd go online and there'd be bulletin boards, and you get people who just love to, throw bombs. There's like anarchist fans who just want to throw bombs. And I always thought that the criticism that it took was actually kind of insane or just mean. Because how come you guys don't understand? I mean, really, look at all the Starfleet ships. They all borrow from each other. Every single one of them. That's the aesthetic of Starfleet ships. All the parts are interchangeable. Every ship's got nacelles. Every ship's got pylons. Every ship's got a saucer. I mean, how come all of a sudden having these twin booms is like so wrong when every single ship that's ever been done is a relative of every other ship? They all, borrow from. That's the whole idea. That's the whole aesthetic. People have forgotten that, which is great because people like the NX now, and they particularly fell in love with it once I introduced the refit. Once I did the refit, all of a sudden people went crazy because you know why? Because Star Trek fans like to feel that you thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they saw that there was a plan to evolve the NX towards the Constitution, so many of them went, I get it now. And that made it, all of a sudden, it was okay. But I still have to say that the whole Akira thing was a fiasco. It was, I mean, really? You guys are acting like you know everything about Starfleet ships, yet you can't see that every one of them has parts and pieces that come from every other ship. Every ship since 1966 has been based on what Matt Jeffries did.
Right.
Everything. Nacelle, saucer. So it's like you'll get people who just want to throw bombs. You know?
Yeah. They do it to fan films. They do it to modern Star Trek. They do it to everything.
Well, it's like, you know, I've had these conversations with like Dave Blass or even Terry Metalis on Picard because I've lived it already. I've gone through it. And I said, look, don't be upset. What you have to remember is that even if they're ripping you a new one, it's because they're really excited about it. And for some people, part of the joy is pointing out where they think you went wrong. Because you could go on the internet and beat your chest, you know, and you know, no better than the big shots, you know.
Can I ask a quick question?
No.
Doug, you've had 3 really big relationships that I can think of during your career. Great partnerships, actually. You have your partnership with Michael, you had a partnership with John, and you had a partnership with Richard, and they were all really a big deal. Is there anything you can say about those partnerships?
Okay, you said John, Mike, Dick Smith.
Well, no, I didn't say Dick Smith. I was actually talking about your relationship on Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, Gary.
Gary, I'm sorry, Gary. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that has been a bonus for me is that there are a lot of people, especially when you're creative, who there's a diva thing that goes on. You know, you think you're a genius, you know, and you could be difficult to work with. I've never been difficult to work with. I've always understood exactly what my place was, and that it's not about proving I'm a genius. I'm here to focus the boss's vision, you know. And and if you have a sense of humor and you know how to work with people, you could slide from department to department without any problem. If you're a diva, you're going to get shut down. So Gary and I, because visual effects and the art department was particularly close at that time. And, you know, if we were doing trials and tribulations, and Gary had the K7 space station and the 4-footer, he'd say, hey, you know, Mike and Doug, can you come down to Image G? I think it needs more weathering, you know, it's K7. And Mike and I would be on ladders with pencils, drawing panel lines and stuff like that. Gary and I had a similar sense of humor, and we could be a little raucous and rambunctious, you know. I mean, Gary loved Mike, but Mike is kind of, he could be kind of straight-laced, you know, where I could be goofy and silly and, you know, so Gary and I, we had an automatic friendship. When I started getting into CG at the end of Deep Space Nine, I remember he came in, I felt someone standing behind me. I was working in the computer program, building something in CG, and I turned around and Gary's back there going, huh. And one day he comes back and goes, say, do you think a guy like you can make a spaceship for a guy like me? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'd love to give that a shot. Huh. It was a ship, I think it was a Breen ship. I hardly knew what I was doing. And he borrowed me from Michael Cuda for 3 or 4 days. I went over to Image G and we built this thing, The Blind Leading the Blind. And I had a great time doing it. And I love working with Gary. He makes it so much fun. It's so easy. And I just remember when we got done with it, I was leaving Image G and I said, wow, Gary, that was really fun. I hope we get a chance to do this again. And I remember Gary saying, be careful what you wish for. And so he tried to get me while I was on Enterprise a few times. And I'm like, Gary, I can't leave Enterprise. It could go for 7 years. It's like guaranteed work almost.
Right.
And he one day in the art department on Enterprise, people came in with tape measures and started measuring the office. And I'm going, that's a really bad sign. They're coming in measuring your office. That means somebody thinks they're going to move in here. And the show got canceled, which actually most people don't realize. The show was not canceled because of ratings. It was canceled because of a blood feud between Les Moonves and Rick Berman. They hated each other.
Right.
Les Moonves basically cancels Enterprise to get rid of Rick Berman. So we found out on the internet that the show was canceled. And I remember driving home that night thinking, wow, I've been on the show like going on 17 years, unheard of. And I may never work again. I mean, that's the way the business is. You don't know if you're ever going to work again. And I'm driving home and feeling kind of glum and not sure what is ahead of me. And I get home and I open the door and Dorothy's standing there and she says, there's a message from Gary Hutzel. And here's the very day. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to invite me to come to Battlestar Galactica. I know it. And I called him up and he says, I heard about Enterprise. And I'm like, yeah. He says, but you know what? Every cloud has a silver lining. I'll never forget that. He invited me. He said, I could set you up at Zoic, which is over there like Santa Monica or something, which honestly I really didn't want to do because I'd come from Foundation Imaging was great, but these factories, you know, where they do visual effects was just not appealing to me. And I said, he says, I don't think you want to come to Vancouver. And I'm like, well, if I came to Vancouver, would I be like your right-hand guy? He goes, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, then I'll come to Vancouver because I'd rather be with you. And I just, you know, Dorothy was amazing. I mean,
yeah.
I told her about it and I wasn't, you know, and her answer was, go get him, Tiger. You know, I mean, she was so amazing. And so I was up there for months. I'd come home every few weeks or so. I was up there for the entire season. And of course, it was another scary event for me. You know, Gary was giving me a lot of responsibility, much more than I ever had at Foundation Imaging. See, that was the beauty. You know, Gary would give me, you know, assignments that they'd never give me at Foundation. When I worked with Dick, I did a lot of work, but I wasn't like, you know, one of the guys who'd been doing makeup for years and years and years who was working with him. Once I started working with Caglione was given the opportunities no one else would give me, you know, and that's what's happening with Gary again. Now I was really, really learning. I mean, with Gary, you would own entire sequences and shots, you know, on Battlestar Galactica. And it was amazing. I mean, you know, I'm sorry Enterprise got canceled, but thank goodness it did. Because if it hadn't gotten canceled, I wouldn't have Emmys.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like the 2 times you got huge opportunities, you ended up with gold statues. Woohoo!
Yeah. You know, I mean, in the art department, the only people who go to the Emmys are the production designer, the art director, and the set decorator. In visual effects, you know, being Gary's right-hand man, there was no doubt I was going to go, but we could bring 10 other guys with us if we wanted to.
Right.
So it's like every department, every union, you know, it's a different rule. I mean, more people should be able to go for art, not just 3 people. You know,
because art is such a big part of the look of any show.
Oh,
I mean, it's just you guys create the canvas in so many ways that people don't realize.
I mean, anyway, it was really fortunate that Enterprise was canceled for me. First of all, Battlestar Galactica was an amazing show. It's incredible to me how many Star Trek fans have not given it a chance.
Yeah, I loved it. Tyler loved it.
It is through the roof amazing with incredible actors. I mean, I was watching, I don't want to insult anybody, but I was had Sci-Fi on, and they got this new show called The Ark, which I had one show and I'm like, wow, this really looks cheap. It's like, I mean, Battlestar Galactica never looked cheap in any way. The acting, the sets, what Gary was doing with the visual effects.
He was pathfinding.
It was amazing. I mean, Star Trek visual effects, even when they were great, was starting to look a little creaky. Ship flies from left to right, you know. They wouldn't let the ships do anything more than that. When you watch what VFX was doing with the Enterprise D flying through the Borg cubes, they never would have let them do that back then, you know.
Good job, by the way. Good job on the previs. Your previs was awesome for them.
Yeah, some of that stuff will end up in the Ships of the Line calendar, no doubt.
Nice. Hey, I want to ask you about another thing you did, though, is that, you know, here you are, you've been on all of these iconic shows now. You've won an Emmy, you've won an Oscar.
2 Emmys.
You've bounced
6 nominations.
6. You've bounced around from just amazing job to amazing job, and yet you got into our realm a little bit, and you did fan film too.
You say I got into what world?
You got into our world, and you did fan films for a little bit.
Well,
you had some involvement.
When we were doing Trials and Tribulations, James Cawley was friends with Bob Blackman, who was the costume designer. And, you know, James is a big original series fan, and he wanted to talk original series with Bob. And Bob is amazing, but he's not a geek. And he said, look, if you want to talk original series, I'll put you through to Doug in the art department. And I was talking to him, and we hit it off. He showed me some stuff he was doing. He had built the turbo lift alcove on the bridge. And at that point, I send him a complete set of the backlits from the TOS bridge that we did for Trials and Tribulations, and also our blueprints that we did. And I joked around. I said, well, when you do your film, I'll do some shots. And I was still really a novice. I mean, there was an episode that was actually written by me and Jim Vanover called In Harm's Way, which I still think is great. It's very creaky to watch it.
That was my introduction to fan films, was In Harm's Way. I
read an interview with Joss Whedon, and he watched it, and he said that he was on the edge of his seat all the way through.
So was I.
And I did some pretty good stuff, but I was still kind of a novice. It wasn't until Galactica where I really got to be good. But I did like 76 shots by myself over a hiatus.
VFX shots?
Yeah. And I learned so much from doing those. And it's a fun episode, you know.
By the way, we shoot our Avalon Universe fan films on that bridge from Star Trek New Voyages.
What, the one in Ticonderoga?
The old one when he rebuilt it, the old one went to our friend Glenn Wolfe. It's in Arkansas now.
Well, I mean, I know there was one in. What was the one they did Star Trek Continues on?
Kingsland. That's in Kingsland. That's Neutral Zone now. Neutral Zone Studios.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I ended up doing maybe 3 or 4 episodes of Star Trek Continues. And at that point, I was like, you know, Vic was like after me to do shots. And by then, I was much better than I had ever been before. And I said, no, I don't do fan films anymore. Because what happens is that when you first start, they treat you special, but then as time goes on, they start nitpicking and stuff like they're paying you. And I want to do it my own way if I'm not getting paid.
Right.
And that's where Vic and I really, he left me alone for like the first 2 episodes. Then after that, the Pixel King was, you know, he was fighting with me about everything at that point. You know, and I'm like, you know,
was he calling you on the phone being like, hey, bro?
Well, you know, I mean, you know, he buttered me up a lot, you know, and but once we started arguing about how shots should be done and fighting with me,
once it stopped being fun, yeah.
well, it's just like, what's my motivation to do it? My motivation is to do it my way. Not to start getting notes from you, you know. Are you telling me that I'm the producer of this and I can't have it my way? I'm saying, well, the day you start paying me my rate, I'll do anything you want. But until then, the deal is that I do it my way. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. And he came over, and I remember there was one night where I just said, I'm done. And he said, what do you mean you're done? And I said, I'm done. And he says, done? I go, yeah, done. I'm done. And those were, I mean, look, when he was trying to get me to do it, he came over one day with footage. I kind of hooked him up with Mike Forrest. He did a really cool episode where Mike Forrest came back. And he would stop by the house with footage. And it looked really amazing. The camera was great. The lighting was great. You know, the acting, you know, I mean, Vic has been an actual actor, you know. He's a good acting coach. And so I was like, wow, okay, I'll do it. And the show looked great. And I don't remember exactly how many I did, but I did some pretty good stuff on a shoestring for them. But it was just like, don't fight with me. I'm not here to fight with you about how to do this. If you're going to let me do it my way, we won't have any issues. But if you're going to start giving me, I'm the producer, you know, I mean, come on, man. I've worked with Mike Nichols, Michael Cimino, Warren Beatty. You know, I mean, come on. You know, it's like, don't give me this. First of all, they paid me. You're not paying me. So, I mean, that's just that thing of me there in Paladin was like, I guess it was in the very first one that they did.
It was the first shot.
It was the first shot.
Yeah.
You know.
Let me ask you this: what similarities do you see between how we do things in fan films and how things go in real shows? What are the similarities? What are the differences?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is the same. You know, it's not that much different, except that you can work people to death on a movie, but there are unions that will step in and say, well, you have to pay these people for these extra hours, you know, time and a half or whatever. When you're working in the real world, you probably had to take a union test to show that you know what you're doing, you know. Not so much in art, but makeup, I had to take a grueling union test, you know. Your fan films tend to be opportunities for people who are just starting out, that they don't have tons and tons and tons of experience of working with really difficult directors and stuff like that. When you work in the business, you're not just starting out and looking for an opportunity. You've got stuff under your belt already. You know, that's why they hired you, because you've got a track record. That makes a difference. There's a lot of people who work in fan films who are really, really good and may even go on to work in professional film and get into the union, you know. But I mean, I think I even did an interview with Variety about fan films, saying that it's a training ground for people who will probably work in the business later on. But I find that a lot of people who work in fan films, well, maybe a lot is the wrong, but there is wrong to say, but there are people who the pressure on a real production is really intense. And most people, a lot of people I find, they have a different idea about what it's going to be like when they get to Hollywood. And then they end up going home saying, I couldn't work out there. They're all so phony and fake. And no, the truth is that you couldn't hack it. You got to take a lot of shit working in fan films, a lot. Not fan films, but professional films.
Oh, you take a lot of it working in fan films,
you take a lot of it working in fan films. But the pressure is really much, 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 much more, you know, in professional films.
I just want to grow up to be Tyler. That's what I want to grow up to be. I want to be just like Tyler. Tyler, you are the man.
Our friend Jonathan Lane always says there are no fan film police that are going to come and arrest us if we don't meet some deadline.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could ruin an entire career, working in on an actual picture. You could get in trouble. You could. I mean, it's like, for instance, there are so many people designing starships now because everybody could get the programs and put them on the internet. But you put those same people in a production situation, and you know what? You don't get 3 months to work on your starship. Like, for instance, the Titan, I blocked that out in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
And there was no saying, well, I couldn't get it done in time. That doesn't fly. You have to get it done. And if you have to stay up 24 hours a day and to do it, sure, I'm not saying it's easy, but when you're at home in your bedroom doing something, it's entirely different. When you're actually on payroll, and especially if you've got some background, there's a lot of pressure for you to perform. If you can't hack that pressure, you're not going to have a career. Yeah, I think Ronan from Ireland put that picture together.
Right.
I didn't watch the Orville when it first came out because I was a little annoyed at it. Well, it was just that they were basically picking our bones, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
No one asked me if I wanted a job and so that was kind of annoying to me. Just like the new Star Treks were annoying because they didn't want us either. And once I got the job, I remember I went in to interview. I think Jeff Mandel got me they didn't have anyone as a graphic designer. And I went in and I met with Stephen and Robert, the art director and production designer. And I gave them a link to like my ArtStation page, and they didn't want to act too excited, but they were very excited because here's a guy who has done it all already, And I remember Robert later told me, remember when I said to you that if you want the job, it's yours on the day you came in? I said, yeah. He says, well, I don't usually do that. I was afraid to lose you. I had never watched the show before. I watched it, and that entire arch in the background that I'm sitting in front of, that was just like carpeting. The arch stuff was there, but it was just like carpeting. And I remember Dorothy looking at it and says, I think I commented, I go, wow, that's not criticizing, the production designer or Steven. But if you haven't worked on a show like this before, you don't know that it doesn't occur to you that most shots are going to be looking at the captain or looking at the main viewing screen, not the sides of the bridge. You're only going to see that once in a while when someone's reporting something. So you've got the view screen or the window, and then you've got this arch behind Seth MacFarlane. That's just carpet.
Yeah. It's
like nothing there. And Dorothy says, it looks like a Fava shoe store. It looks like there should be like sneakers on the wall, And I remember looking at that and saying, wow, what I could do with that. And it was the first thing they gave me when I came in. I guess it occurred to them after 2 seasons that you got to do, that's some important real estate back there and it's not being used. So Stephen and Robert gave me that. And I remember they had some conceptual stuff that had been done, and all those inset panels, the artwork was like science fiction design. Remember I talked about science fiction, then craft logic? It was like all illuminated panels with hexagons, blue hexagons, honeycomb almost. And I'm looking at that going, that's not aircraft logic design, that's science fiction. And so they had that art, and I actually did some samples of what that would look like. And Seth MacFarlane looked at it and said, looks like a disco. I don't like it. And so they had me doing some, I told them what I thought I would do, but at that point they were telling me what they wanted. And it was just not flying. It was getting rejected. And then finally, Stephen explaining something else he wanted to try. And he's a unique kind of guy. you have to learn to understand his language. And he says, you know what I mean? And I was like, of course, at this point in my career, I don't mind saying I have no idea what you're talking about, because it's okay. I don't have, if you're new to the business, you're going to say, yes, sir, I know exactly what you mean. And then go, what the hell do you mean? And then talk to somebody else. Did you hear what he said? What did that mean to you? I just said to Steven, I said, I'm sure it's me. I'm not that smart. I have no idea what you just said. And I just remember him saying, well, look, just do what you think is right. And so that's when I did like 12 different versions of what you see there. And, they went for it right away. Seth MacFarlane liked it. It looks functional. It looks like there's something going on there. And I had a lot of fun doing it, although it was very, very scary doing it, because all of those panel openings that all those panels are in, those were kind of in the construction in the mill. They winged that. They had a basic shape, and then they just built it without diagrams. They built it without blueprints. So it wasn't like they could say, here, Doug, here's a blueprint of that arch in the back with perfect measurements of all the cutouts. It didn't exist. So for me to make stuff that fit in there perfectly, I'm like, how the hell am I going to do that? So it was like I was going down the set, laying a giant piece of paper over different sections, tracing what was there, taking it back to the art department, printing it out, doing the design, printing it out, taking it down to see if it fits. The angle's wrong here. It's short over here. It was like trial and error for like a solid week. And I think I thought I finally had it. I mean, look how close the tolerances are. There's no room to be wrong.
Yeah.
And so when I finally had everything built and printed, I was shitting a little bit, that everything was going to work. And I remember Robert Strohmeyer at like 3 a.m. texted me a picture with a big smiley face on it with everything in. And man, it was at that point that they were really, I think they knew that I had lots of experience, but until you actually do something for them and come across, that's when they really start to trust you, So I really enjoyed doing that back there. And I think it revitalized the entire bridge, The bridge didn't look functional to me until that went in.
Yeah.
Of course, other things that they did, I think they had carpet originally. Which, it looks so much better without carpet. It looks so much better with the hard floor, where it picks up light. Carpet doesn't pick up light. There's no reflections. Reflections are beautiful.
Yeah.
I heard so many, especially early in Picard and second season with the Stargazer, the shiny floors. People the anarchists were coming out of the walls, saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous." They called it Floorgate. Why would Starfleet make a floor that you can't even walk on? It's so slippery and shiny. And I'm like, dude, have you never been to New York City and gone into buildings with shiny marble floors? And and first of all, why would you even think that Starfleet would design a starship with floors you can't walk on?
Yeah.
I mean, what makes you say that? I've been on those sets. I've run in those corridors. You can't run on the assumptions. It's, it's like, why would you go after that when it's totally not true? I mean, it's not ice. Just because it's shiny, it's not ice. You're not going to, I love the floors on the Titan. I love the shiny floors that pick up the light. It looks gorgeous. My only complaint is that, and I don't mean to criticize anyone, I'm just, a personal opinion, and doesn't mean I'm right, but I think that a lot of the sets on Titan are underlit. I want to see those sets, I understand that that's the look of shows these days, because they've got video cameras that don't need a lot of light. And so they were using, the ship was defined by its graphics. But I thought in the second season, when you see the bridge for the Stargazer, that's where the bridge looks really, it was different DP.
Yeah.
And please, Mr. DP, if you did season 3, I'm not criticizing. It's just my opinion. I would like to have seen more of the ship. And look, all you have to do is see some. Almost everyone, I think, universally agrees that you could have had a little more light on those sets to see them.
I think what they should have done is like in a normal flight mode situation, they should have had it bright, and then like when it's damaged or in battle mode or something, you could do darker lighting.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at a CIC on an aircraft carrier, it's not brightly lit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's dark so that your readouts and your monitors are what stand out. You know, and that's, I guess, basically what they were trying to do. But I just know how beautiful that bridge is, and you don't really get to see it in all its glory. And if there is another show, I hope that we could have a little more light going on in there.
And this is yours too, this statue?
Yeah, I mean, I originally did it for the encyclopedia. So it wasn't, I did it for the Star Trek encyclopedia. And when we were doing Enterprise, I thought that it would make a great prop for Archer's, room, is a cabin. And so I had it on my desk on top of my monitor, just waiting for the opportunity. You don't go to the set decorator and say, how about this? I mean, some of them will be, yeah, that's a great idea. Then others will be like, don't tell me how to do my job. So I basically just waited for an opportunity. And I think that Rick Berman was going to go down and look at the Archer's quarters. And Jimmy Meese, the set decorator, came up to the art department kind of desperate. What can I use to dress the set with? I mean, he had dressed it already, but he wanted more. And I just went, how about this? I went, yeah, I grabbed it, took it down the set, put it on stage. And Rick Berman came down and looked at it and said, where did you get that? And that was it. It was in the show, And
it made it into Picard as well.
Well, unfortunately, they didn't. I don't know why, or maybe, Dave didn't realize that I had it. And they printed one that was only about this big, that they got off the internet, that there's facets in it because it's a low resolution model. This is about this big. It's not faceted because it's hand sculpted, And so this one is not in the show, but what they had in there on Geordi's desk, which is tiny, that would have looked awesome on Geordi's desk. So that was kind of a little bit of a disappointment. Maybe he just didn't realize that I did it and that I had it,
But the real talk of the town, and we brought it up a few times.
That's a great shot, man. Look at Jonathan. He's such a sweet guy. Look at the affection he has for me there. It's like I spent a lot of time with him. Yes, it was many years ago, but he still knows my name and thinks of me as family. We all.
And he's a sweet guy. I've met him, and
he's the best. I think I had put a couple of things on my Facebook page. I'm in the transporter room on Next Generation, and I'm taking I have a powder puff, and I'm taking the shine off of him. And every time I put that puff against him, he'd lean against it like this and let out little moans of pleasure.
It's so him.
And he looks at me and he goes, Dougie, is this how you touched Warren? He's so much fun. He of course, everybody was totally fun on that show. Brent Spiner was nuts. Michael Dorn was hilarious. Patrick in the beginning was stuffy. Those guys pulled him out of his British proper shell, on Next Generation. He hardly had a sense of humor in the very beginning. But you can't work with these people without loosening up, Jonathan is just a riot, The later it got, the funnier it got,
Can you believe, did you ever think in a million years they were going to rebuild this set, that you were going to go back to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, look, you're looking at a guy who recreated the original series bridge several times. And I know that I probably made a joke about, in another 20 years, we may be recreating the Enterprise D bridge, and we laugh. But I knew if we were doing this one, if the shows kept going, we might be recreating the bridge we're on right now, on TNG. I always knew that was a possibility. Once you've seen that we did the original series bridge, you know, it could happen, and it did. And I think that's half the reason why I wanted to get a copy of the blueprints when I did, because you never know.
So we owe a big part of this to you.
Well, I mean, those plans came in mighty handy. I know Paramount had some of it, but I had every sheet of it. And, you know, when I told them that, Paramount sent a person right over to get them and scan them. Of course, they had to redraw everything from the blueprints, because nowadays you want it in like CAD or in the computer or in SketchUp or whatever, so that if you're designing parts of it, those files, nowadays you could send files to the mill and they could print things out. You know, a lot of stuff is printed these days. So they had all those plans and they had to redraw them. And I mean, Liz Klakowski was the art director in charge of making this happen. And she did such an amazing job. Of course, she had a lot of people who really knew the show. You know, Mike, myself, Denise, Dave, Blass, Terry Metalis. It looks like he's taking a nap up there. Terry is. Thank God for Terry. There's no way we would have been back without him.
Right.
You know, so many times he would say on set in front of everyone, "It wouldn't be Star Trek without you guys."
Yeah.
And we hadn't heard that in forever, you know.
Well, now Paramount knows whenever they really need something from the past, they need to go back to the Drex files. The Drex files.
They forget everything. You know, it takes someone like Dave, who's back there on the left, who grew up on the shows. I mean, I was talking to Dave on Messenger and Facebook for a while. And I just thought he was a fan. He sent me pictures of himself in one of those maroons, Prisoner of Zenda Starfleet uniforms, that very military uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's awesome. And then he told me he was going to be the production designer of Picard. I'm like, what? Well, he didn't tell me that. And he was saying that he wanted to get the band back together, you know.
Awesome.
He felt the same way that Terry did, that he didn't want us. There's plenty of room to do lots of original, beautiful stuff, but don't burn everything that came before.
Yeah.
I mean, Terry, holy crap. Well, I mean, one of the most, usually every time they do a new show, they, as far as musical score goes, except for once in a while having the original theme come in and out, Terry understood the power of sense memory. You know, one of the things I loved about the original series was that they used a lot of music over. They had a music library and they would use certain cues and stings and stuff over. The beauty of that, it's like listening to a song that you love, where you anticipate what's coming, and that gives you joy. That score for Picard, we haven't heard a score like that since the original series, meaning that he knew every bit of music from all the movies and stuff that had gone by and said, I want this piece from Mutara Nebula here. I want this piece from Enterprise Leaves Dry Dock here. I want this piece. And so now fans are watching the show and wonderful moments are rushing back because the musical cue brings a sense memory that just is like amazing. Terry, he's so freaking smart. And all these years, they've never done that because you get people in and they want to put their own spin on everything. And plus the other thing is that Rick Berman, I love a lot of the music on Next Generation, but Rick, where Bob Justman liked music that was descriptive of what was happening on the scene, Rick Berman used music more like wallpaper. He even called it wallpaper, where it didn't really intrude. To him, it was intruding if it was too forward. I like the music that is, you know, really clocked in with the action. Some people call it Mickey Mousing, you know. I don't see that as a criticism, you know. I think that it's a smart thing to do in the right place. And Terry totally understands that. And that's
Terry's a fan, and us fans for years have been begging for all the stuff that you're talking about. We wanted the band back together. We wanted the Akudas back in. We wanted you back in. We wanted people that knew what it was. It's almost like Kirk's line from Star Trek 2 when he goes, Savik, you have to learn how things work on a starship. And that's what Paramount was lacking. They didn't know how things work on a starship and on that show. And you guys brought that back. And
Well-
Beaky helped out, I'm sure.
Well, he's been there since the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
42 years old, you know.
I know.
I've explained this to other people. You know, you can't. I see them like ripping people who work on the newer shows. You know, Alex Kurtzman has taken a lot of crap from fans. They're not evil. They're not trying to wreck Star Trek. It's just that if it's not in your DNA and you're not a geeky fan, you won't know what you're missing. How could you? You can't know. None of those people are bad.
Right.
They're doing the best job that they can. If you bring in someone like Terry and Dave or me or Mike, we know the little nitty gritty things and we know when we're going off course.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the people that are working on the show don't know it like we do. It's just that you don't know what you don't know if you don't know. You know, right?
So, Doug, I want to ask you about something very special to you that happened in this season of Picard that a lot of us found very touching, and it's this.
You got another view? That's my least favorite view. Hey, you want to go back? Here, go.
It's a very interesting design.
It's, you know, it's based on a design that Bill Krause came up with. You see, the thing about these days today is you could spend a couple of months coming up with a design, or you could go on the internet where there's hundreds of designs being done by people. And Terry could go, that's great. I really like that. Let's spin it off of that. And so on one hand, I understand doing that because time is of the essence. And you don't have to do trial and error. He could just like go shopping. And then he could pick out a few things like the Titan was another Bill Krause. He had come across Bill Krause's page or several ships he really liked. And so my job would be, I would take those designs and spin them into Picard designs. You know, so this is like an approval model that I did, you know, where I brought it into the Picard world. So yeah, that's the Intrepid. My least favorite angle.
Sorry.
How did you know?
Magic.
You know, for a while there, we were going to light up. I think John Eves came up with it. Light up the MCC numbers, but that didn't end up happening. Yeah, I mean, you don't see too much of this ship. It's just in that one sequence. But yeah, I mean, just about every Starfleet ship, except for the ones they got from Star Trek Online to fill out the fleet, went through me, including the Daystrom. And I mean, it was kind of heaven for a guy like me. The thing is that Dave says, you know, you could bring in illustrators who are Star Wars. He says a lot of people are Star Wars fans. They want to be doing Star Wars. They don't particularly want to be doing Star Trek. And he says, and I have to stop and explain what a warp core egress hatch is. And I have to stop and explain what he does. For him to work with people who know nothing about Star Trek, aircraft logic, he knew that the best thing was to bring in the people who wrote the book on it. And he said that many times. He said, you guys wrote the book. The beauty is that, and this is no criticism of Orville, but it is sort of. Seth MacFarlane would never ask me my opinion on something. If I tried to fill out the graphics with the technology and name things and try to figure function out, didn't want that. You know, I get a note back saying, from now on, you're only allowed to use numbers. You know, on Picard, Terry would write me and call me and say, I've got this situation. How should we do this? Or how should we handle this? Or, you know, it's a whole different thing. On Star Trek, I got listen, I'm very grateful for the Orville, and Orville really saved my ass, especially when Dorothy got sick and I had health insurance. But on Picard with Terry and Dave, whatever Mike thought was pivotal to them. On the Orville, I got to do stuff I liked doing, but it wasn't pivotal to Seth MacFarlane whether I thought it was a good idea or not. I just had to do my job. And so if I had to choose between the two shows, and I love Orville, and I thought the third season was really great, but Picard was much more fulfilling to me because they saw me as an integral part of everything. And once again, I got to say, I'm not criticizing Orville because every show is a different ecosystem, and Seth is the boss and he wants it to be the way that's a nice angle. That's pretty awesome angle.
It's beautiful. There is even there a Constitution class influence, even an X influence there for sure.
Well, I mean, that's the aesthetic of Starfleet.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the Enterprise D a little bit. E a little bit. It's got a little of that in it with the top part of the bridge going into the secondary hull.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of the elongated starships with the elongated saucers. And I'm partly responsible for that happening because that was my influence on Voyager to stretch it. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm glad Terry wanted to go back to saucers that were more round, and I don't think any of the ships that we did for Picard had those long, because what happens is you end up with another submarine shape.
Yeah.
And I just was never a really big fan of that. I was really happy that we were going back to more of a saucer shape. For instance, being sure that people can pick out a phaser strip, people can pick out a transporter emitter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what fans want because they feel like they're part of a private club. And they like to be able to say to their friends who are new to it, saying, well, that is a transporter emitter, and that's a warp field governor, and that's a reaction control thruster. Of course, the other thing is that you want to look at a Federation starship and see that the paneling all looks functional and that it's related to panels that we've seen. The aesthetic of the technology remains constant. There was a scene, was it the end of season 1, Picard? Where they had
with a copy and paste fleet, and you couldn't tell what any of it was.
How many thousands of ships can you get in one spot in a snap of a finger? They're supposed to be spread out all across some of them it takes months, that didn't make any sense to me. Then the other thing was that they sure didn't look like Starfleet ships to me. The paneling was just like ND paneling, may have been done with a program or something. All of these panels on the ship, I hand designed them, people, when you look at a Starfleet ship, part of the joy is being able to say, oh, okay, I see. If I pull these panels up, I pretty much know what's under them, That's part of the fun.
Well, at your birthday party, Mike and I were off to the side, and I said to him, and you also said something about your Star Wars comment, where I said, well, it seemed like Star Wars people took over Star Trek, and it was a problem because, when JJ was doing it, we always care about how the Enterprise works, while just about nobody really cares how the Millennium Falcon works. And then Mike looked at me and he goes, I care.
Well, it's like, I don't care.
It was really funny though. But I could see him caring about something like that. But the truth is, and so we did agree on the fact that most Star Wars people don't care. They just want to see fast and light speed and stuff like that. But in Star Trek, everything has to make sense. And of course, I mentioned his book.
I know that Mike cares, but Star Wars isn't about the tech so much.
Right, but it was funny. It was telling.
I've had conversations with Mike where we're saying, well, there's people in licensing who don't know anything. And I said, you can't know. You can't expect them to know. And he says, I can. He says, they should learn it. And I'm like, well, Mike, you're being pretty idealistic here when you say that. That you think that they're going to learn all of this. It's just not, to me, it's just not going to happen. You got to put the right people in the right positions. J.J. Abrams was never a Star Trek fan.
Nope.
He didn't even really care for Star Trek. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite moments was when the first movie was about to come out. He was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, the amazing Jon Stewart.
Yep.
And John is like listening intently. And JJ says, well, I never really was a Star Trek fan. And he said, and I really hated it when they would get all philosophical and stuff like that. And that was like a knife in my heart. Oh my God, that's what I loved about Star Trek and what Star Wars never did. Star Wars isn't introspective. Star Wars isn't that.
It's Cowboys and Indians.
Yeah, it's Cowboys and Indians. I just remember Jon Stewart saying, I think I stopped hearing you when you said you didn't like Star Trek. And yeah, me too.
Here's a question for you, Doug. What happened to the Enterprise E? Everyone's dying to know.
Well, you see, that's part of the genius of Terry Matalas. You don't let people hear what Seven said when they left the dry dock.
Mm-hmm.
So what's is it going to be take us out? Is it going to be out there that way? Is it going to be? And she goes, and the camera cuts to outside. And now everyone's going crazy, wondering what she said. And that's genius on his part. You could say something and it will never match up to what everyone wants to hear. It's like old-time radio in a way, where you have to kind of fill things in yourself and leave some mystery. That's kind of exciting.
And it harkened back that line about, that was not my fault. It goes right back to the Deep Space Nine where they're asking him about the Klingons. And he's like, we don't, it's a long story. We don't.
Well, actually, that was the best way to handle it. The way they handle it on Deep Space Nine. To come up, it was so much better to, fire people's imaginations. We do not speak of it. I love that. I love that. We don't know what happened to the E. What happened? What did Worf do? Now fans are going to go write their own stories.
Yeah.
I hope it was a blaze of glory. It was a glorious day to die.
I mean, like the Ships of the Line calendar. I always tell everybody, do a page that suggests the story. You don't have to spell it out. People will fill it in on their own. You can't just do a shot of a ship. I rarely do pages where it's just a beauty shot of a ship. Once in a while, if it's really amazing. But for the most part, it's like, make this page about something happening. We don't have to explain what it is. The fans are creative. They'll come up with their own stories.
Cool.
So I think that Terry was really smart to not spell everything out, let people toy with it. People are going to be wondering what what Worf did with the Enterprise E. We may find out eventually, but by the time that rolls around, people are going to be fans love coming up with their own theories, fan theories. It's awesome. Right.
Well, until they ruined the Kobayashi Maru for us with Star Trek, JJ Trek, we always had like all these amazing thoughts and process. What did Captain Kirk do to beat the no-win scenario? What did he exactly do? And it was great that we didn't know. We could just make it up in our own head.
Yeah.
And then they had him sitting on a bridge with an apple doing dumb things.
That. I hated that. I mean, that is not Kirk.
No,
maybe
at all.
Gary Mitchell.
Yeah, that'd be right.
I mean, even Gary Mitchell said that Kirk was so serious. He was like
stack of books.
Kirk would never be that way.
No.
So that was offensive to a lot of fans that Kirk would be.
Finnegan and Gary Mitchell painted Kirk completely different as to what they decided to turn him into.
Yeah. I didn't like him being a troublemaker. The way, you're looking at the only cadet who ever beat the Kobayashi Maru. I love that they don't go into it, and you're sure that Kirk did it in a way that was cheating.
Right.
But I'm sure that Kirk didn't do it in a way that was flip.
Yeah.
And acted like he disrespected everything.
As a matter of fact, when his son said, "Oh, he cheated," he goes, "I changed the rule," or whatever it was, and he seemed a little miffed by it for a second, and he goes, "Got a pat on my back for ingenuity,"
Yeah, I thought the way JJ's Kirk did it took the whole thing down a little bit. It kind of made it seemed disrespectful, and
the speculation that I always heard was that Kirk reprogrammed the simulator so that the Klingons respected him, and when he hailed them, they're like, "Oh, it's Kirk." That was the fan theory that I heard. When he talked to them, they were like, "Well, do you need help saving the Kobayashi Maru? We'll put it in a tractor beam for you."
There you go again with not telling the whole story and letting fans
don't tell it. We could all just figure it out in our own brain pan.
Don't spell everything out. Of course, like I said, I didn't like what JJ did with Kirk.
Oh gosh!
He turned him into that character from the movie Battleship. It was just horrible.
Well, I like the Battleship.
But not that moment. But the moment where he was just like a total turkey or whatever, you would get thrown out of the service. You would never. It was almost like that's what they were doing with Kirk. I'm like, he wasn't that guy. He was so much smarter than that.
Well, there were even worse moments in the first JJ movie. I mean, like, didn't Spock abandon Kirk on some planet?
Yeah.
Come on, really?
Is that really worse than brick floors in engineering? I don't know. Just my opinion.
Well, first of all, using a brewery. We had a sign in the Battlestar Galactica visual effects department that said it had so many days, 300 days, no breweries. When we did Blood and Chrome, I did a shot in the expanded hangar bay. That was epic, in my opinion. Where, young Adama is walking through and you're seeing all these lifts bringing Vipers down and stuff like that. That was my FU to the first JJ movie.
Right.
You guys thought why would you use a brewery? I mean, look what we did. We're not even a big feature film with money.
We did our TV budget.
Yeah, and also shows how they don't understand fans. I mean, what if you had used a brewery for the bridge? What's the difference? It's crazy.
Are you familiar with a movie made in the early 90s called Space Mutiny? Have you ever heard of that? It was a scam to like move money out of South Africa or something. My friend Eric Parkinson distributed it, and they shot the whole thing in like a factory or something, but it's supposed to be a spaceship, but it's got like windows and like rails, and it's in some power plant or something. They're saying a spaceship, but it's clearly some industrial building because there's sunlight coming in. And they parodied it on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
It can work sometimes. Red Dwarf did a great job, using locations, like basements of buildings for the interior of the Red Dwarf. But the whole show
wasn't established like Star Trek is, and based on design.
It wasn't like you knew that Red Dwarf was winking at you, and it was all in the family and all fun,
Mm-hmm.
But on Star Trek, it just doesn't work at all.
So, Doug, what's next for you? What have you got in the future?
Well,
the adventure isn't over.
No, although I think I have another job in me. Almost certainly, there's going to be a season 4 of Orville.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Great.
The show's done. Season 3 did great. They even moved it to Disney Plus. If anyone says they're not going to do another,
can I hold your rolls of tape for you? I'll keep like an apron on with full of rolls.
Use tape on Orville. No tape.
No tape.
Won't let me do it. Except for the day there were big light leaks in the fighter, and Robert calls me and says, "Bring your tape." But,
that was a cool fighter, by the way. Really cool fighter.
Oh well, the small craft in season 3, that the shuttle Oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
those were so beautiful. And I redesigned the entire hangar deck floor so that it actually makes sense and tells a story now. There's lifts, and the first 2 seasons, that floor didn't make any sense to me at all. It doesn't tell a story. You could tell whoever did it knows how to use Adobe Illustrator, but knows nothing about ships. What was I saying though? I was.
What's next?
Oh yeah. Anyone who is saying, "Oh yeah, it's canceled," you know, you don't move it to Disney Plus if it's not doing well. You know, I mean, how can you say that? I knew that the minute I heard it was going to Disney Plus, I knew it was going to come back, and that was a while ago. You know, but there are anarchists who like to stir people up by saying it's been canceled. You know, I'm not saying 100% sure because I don't have that right to say that, but from where I'm standing, there's going to be a season 4. I have no doubt in my mind. I'm hoping that there's going to be a Star Trek Legacy. I mean, the hard thing for me is if those things overlap. You know, I want to do Orville, but Legacy is really more of a siren's call for me because Terry, I've got a showrunner who really hangs on what I think, you know.
Nice.
And of course, the other thing is that if on Star Trek, they'll let me work from home. You know, I don't do graphics. If you do graphics, you kind of need to be there to make sure everything fits in place. And, you know, when I'm designing ships, I mean, everything on Picard was done right here, you know. So it's an embarrassment of riches, really. I really I don't even really want to do one more show, honestly. I want to, you know, I want to have a retirement where I go and do things, whatever I want, you know. And I have a new girlfriend now who I really am crazy about, and you know, we'd like to go do stuff.
It just makes me so happy to see that, to see those pictures you've shared of the two of you, and to see the happiness in your life. It overjoys me.
Well, Sean knows, and of course I put a lot of stuff on Facebook about my loss of Dorothy, and I was very open with it. A lot of people were really like surprised by how open I was. Most people don't talk about these things. I was right out there with it. It was part of my recovery, really was. Writing stories about.
She seems like she was just amazing, though.
Amazing. I mean, we were together 32 years and we never had a single argument ever.
Yeah. And she was a good cheerleader and she backed you up 100%.
That was on her way. Yeah, she was amazing. I mean, you know, she came to work with us on Dick Tracy, and we worked together for 3 years before we ever dated. So we knew each other really well by the time that happened.
The goddess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, here was a strong, independent woman who worked in the business, and her biggest happiness was taking care of me, you know. And man, she could cook, and you know, it was incredible.
And she was the set craft services and
not craft service. Craft service is people who feed snacks to the crew.
Oh, she made the food for the show for the cast and crew.
She was a food stylist on Enterprise.
Okay.
Well, you know, the thing was that Craig Binkley, you know, usually the prop guy's in charge of bringing in a food stylist, and he was bringing in food stylists, and it wasn't working out. I just remember, hang on, come here, you. Oh, you don't want to go here. You want to go down here? There you go. I knew he was having problems with the food stylists. They had decided that they wanted to stop using turbo lifts for plot exposition. They wanted to do more like they used to do in Bonanza, sit around the breakfast table and talk about what was going on. So that meant food. Excuse me. And I could see that Craig was having a hard time. And I knew that Dorothy would be perfect. But you know, the thing is that you don't want to come in and tell them that until they're desperate. Excuse me. Or I waited till Craig was desperate. And I went in and he was like, Dougie, he says, I don't know what it is. I can hire food stylists, but for some reason they don't know what it means to be on time. They can't follow direction. You can't have that on a TV set. You got people who need to be there and understand what you're talking about. And I said, we used to call him Bink, Craig Binkley. I said, Binky boy, have I got the girl for you. And I said, look, Dorothy, and you've met her, she can cook, and she knows how, and she's organized, and she's strong and independent. And blood is thicker than water. She'd rather die than let me down. Look at her. Look at her. God damn it.
Talk about strong, right?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first met her, I was going to Vince's gym. And she said, well, I don't do the E word. And I'm like, the E word, it's like exercise. I'm like, okay, I understand. A lot of people don't like that. But then as years were starting to go by, I was looking better and everyone else was getting soft and pudgy. And one day she said to me, I want you to introduce me to Vince's gym. And I was like, really? And I'm thinking, she's not going to last more than a week because Vince's gym is dirty and dark. There's no air conditioning in the summer. There's no heat in the winter. Vince is a cranky old bastard. And she came in and I set her up with Wynn Armstrong, who was the actor R.G. Armstrong's son. And I said, I want to set you up with a trainer so he'll teach you, And she took over the gym, man. It was amazing. And I think that's when I started noticing her as a girl. Up until then, it was like she was someone who worked for me or with me. And I treated her like my sister, And then she started coming in and picking up weights and started building a body, And, wearing two-piece outfits, with a bare midriff. And I'm going, wow. And I did something that I said to her, if I did this today, I could have gotten in a lot of trouble. And actually, basically, I came up behind her and just ran my hand down her back, right down to her butt crack, practically. I didn't even intend to. It was just like my body did it. And I went, oh. And I said, if I did that today, and she said, you didn't hear me complaining. And it was after that she started inviting me over to the house for dinner, So, it was like 32 years of just utter bliss,
Yeah.
And then she got sick, and it was the worst time of my life. And it took a long time for it to, for her to pass away. And I was suicidal for 6 months after that. I didn't see any reason to go on at all. What do you want?
Well, when they say that everything happened for a reason, I'll tell you, it was amazing that Orville was around at that time. So like you said, you had your insurance stuff lined up and all that. And that was helpful.
I don't know what to do. Can you give me 1 minute to get rid of him?
Yeah. Hey, he can join the party. That's totally fine. What's the bird's name?
Beaky.
Beaky?
Yeah, like Beaky, like Beaker. Beaky.
That's what he wanted. He wanted to go front. Yeah, Orville saved me because if my health insurance had run out, oh my God.
Yeah.
The price of everything is just ridiculous. I would have been ruined. But a week after she died, Robert Strohmeyer, the art director on Orville, called me and said, we're doing Ted. The Seth MacFarlane thing with the boozing, carousing teddy bear? As a series, 10 episodes. It was a week after she died. And I said, Robert, I just don't know if I could deal with the pressure because I'm emotionally unstable. I still cry at the drop of a hat now. Before that, I never cried at anything, Now it's like, I cried all through Picard season 3, and Robert said, Doug, I think you need this. He says, you need to think about something else. And so I just told him, I said, you just have to understand that I could lose it, and I can't guarantee. He says, well, we'll worry about that if it happens. And so I went in, and it really was the right thing to do. I was around my friends, who loved me. And, when you've got stuff you've got to get done for the show, it's a good distraction.
Well, during that time, though, thousands of people, because you always had people that would, maybe 200 or 300 people would click on stuff with a like, or 100 people. But when you were going through that, all the people came out of the woodwork. If you put something like Dorothy writing you little notes in every single one of your
like 1,200 likes.
Lunches forever, and you having all those around your cubicle during the time, people were clicking 2,000 loves and likes and everything. And it would be up only for 2 hours when you were up to those numbers, 3 hours. And it was because everybody loves you, man. They love your nature, your laugh, your coolness. We loved her. We loved your stories about each other.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you that a couple of things that really, one is one of the guys from Celestis, the launch company that sends remains out into space, like Gene Roddenberry, Leonard Nimoy, said,
lifelong friend of mine, Mark B. Lee. Yeah.
Yes, Mark Lee. He said, this would be a great thing for Dorothy. And I said, well, I'm sure it's pretty expensive. And he goes, well, it's about $12,000. And I can imagine me asking Dorothy, I'm going to spend $12,000 to send you into space. And she'd be, you're out of your mind,
She'd thank you.
And he said, well, you could do a GoFundMe. And I said, I can't ask the fans for money, because I had a situation with Space Command with
right.
What's his name?
Mark Zickery.
Mark Zickery, where I raised with my artwork and stuff, and like about $350,000.
Wow.
On GoFundMe. It was amazing. And then our working relationship went downhill once. He broke promises to me, and once again, it was like, I do this for if this happens, and then they don't do it, and I'm like, well, then I'm out. And I always felt guilty about all the people who I knew put money in because it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told Mark, I said, I can't ask the fans for money again. And then I said, but you could do a GoFundMe if you want for Dorothy, and I'll back it up. And by God, Mark Lee did a GoFundMe page for Dorothy on his own. And in 24 hours raised all the money.
Yeah.
And I
was 1701.
Were you?
I was the one who put $1,701.
Oh, God.
For 1701.
It really was so touching that I cried, Another time was Michael Cuda sent a picture of me and Dorothy to the International Space Station.
Yeah.
And in the cupola, where you could see the Earth,
they
took an iPad and put the picture of me and Dorothy and just floated it in front of the Earth. And I was in a diner having lunch with somebody when Mike sent me that picture, and I lost it. I utterly lost it. It was so touching.
I remember through that a lot of that period. I was really worried about you, because I would read those posts, and I was extremely worried about you. And you didn't even know me from a can of paint. You know what I mean? Like, when we first talked on Messenger, you're like, who are you again?
Well, I talked to a lot of people.
But I was worried about you, and to see,
there's a good reason to be worried about me.
To see where you're at now, I'm so happy.
Well, when I've been going out with Donna for about 3 months now, and she's so sweet and so peaceful and kind, and plus she's a beautiful girl. It's really startling. After Ted ended, and now I was just home alone, I was really getting crushed because I felt the universe had kind of abandoned me. I felt like, and all I was here with that bossy parrot. Bully, he's a bully. And it really was ripping my heart out. And then when I met Donna and we started going out and we started falling for each other, and all of a sudden I had affection again. Because I had unlimited affection for 32 years. I mean, Dorothy always gave me unbelievable affection every day. I mean, so wonderful. I feel like Dorothy sent Donna to me. I can't shake that feeling. There's so many things about her that she'd like. And, she's kind of, Sean knows, she pivoted everything for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have something to live for again. And I took her to Yuri's night a few weeks ago. She doesn't know much about Star Trek, which was great, I mean, and she grew up in Korea, like in Seoul, for the first 20 years of her life, so she's from a different culture as well. And I found that really refreshing too, and took her to Yuri's night, which is that big aerospace kind of party that they have at the Science Museum, and dressed her in a Starfleet uniform.
She looked good. She looked good in that uniform.
Awesome in a Starfleet uniform.
She looked like an admiral.
She's my age. People look at her and go, "Oh, he's dating a really young girl." Oh no, we're the same age. Figure man and a flawless face. And she looked. I mean, you could put her at the helm. You could have put her at the helm on a starship instantly, and she'd fit perfectly.
That's great.
She had a great time. I told her, I go, there are going to be people there who are scientists who are going to act like I'm special. And we're going to be going to Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Con in August. And I said, boy, if you thought Yuri's night was something, wait till we see.
There's no way I'm missing that. There is no way I'm missing that. I am going to the Rio. I'm going to hang out with you guys. Too.
That would be fantastic.
Planning on coming.
It's going to be a blast. I'm going to be there for Friday and Saturday. We'll fly in early on Friday. I'm going to have someone babysit Beaky overnight and come back Saturday evening. But she's going to have a ball. She has no idea. This is all new to her.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole new thing. It's kind of refreshing in a way. I mean, Dorothy knew more about Star Trek, but she wasn't a geek. Knew more about Star Trek than Donna. There's just something really refreshing about her not knowing anything about this world.
Because now you can share it with her.
Yeah, exactly. And also, the cultural difference is kind of refreshing too. She isn't. She doesn't talk a lot about herself. Where you could get me going, and I could blab all night long. With her, I have to earn the knowledge. I think especially women from that part of the world, from that era, tend to keep it, contained.
Well, Luna loves her. Luna is crazy about her, and she definitely from what I've seen and heard and what Luna's texted and all that other stuff. What a cool connection that is too. Instantly was just all about her and the whole energy and the whole thing. Yeah, but like you said, when it comes to the geekiness and stuff like that, it's probably refreshing to her that it's not like that, Because with me, when I mentioned anything from that Star Trek, she went, "Oh, you're one of them."
Who did that? Who said that?
Luna. When I quoted 2 words, when we were watching her episode at your house really late, while we're all a little buzzed on Dom Perignon, 30-year-old, 40-year-old Dom Perignon. We're all sitting at your house. We're watching the episode. Priscilla had never seen it, my girlfriend. And so she's enjoying watching Priscilla's thing. And then all of a sudden I'm doing some quotes and she goes, "Oh no, you're one of them."
I've never gotten that.
What's that?
I've never gotten, she's not being disrespectful when she says that.
No. Of course not. It was the way that she said it, but it was just funny. She was like, she just instantly recognized I was a geek.
She loves her Star Trek fans. She loves her Star Trek fans.
Of course she does. Of course she does.
So one last thing, and I didn't bring pictures in of it, and I told you this a while back, but you had things going on in your life. We had a fan film that we made in 2021 called Agent of New Worlds. Some people have referred to it as Two Broke Girls of the Galaxy, if you've seen it.
Two broke girls.
But there's a scientist, there's an engineer, and she's testing a new engine, and she crash lands on a planet. And then her scientist friend comes, and she crash lands on the same planet looking for her. And there are two shuttles that they crash land on this planet. And one shuttle is called Drexler, and the other shuttle is called Cuda.
Get out of here.
And that's just something we did because you guys are special to me. You know, when I went on my journey of making Star Trek fan films, yeah, I love to write the stories and shoot them and all this kind of stuff. But I loved doing the art type stuff, designing the displays and the LCARs and stuff. And with our fan films, Avalon universe, we're not in the Prime Star Trek universe. We created our own parallel universe and created a reason why it exists so that we could diverge and do different things. We could make a Constitution class look a little different. We could make shuttles look a little different. We could have different uniforms. And being able to put some production design and some art direction into my own little Star Trek fan film universes, really, it was one of the most fun parts for me. I told Michael Cuda that. I said I just loved designing the displays and the designs, and he goes, I like doing that too.
Hey, it was a thrill for me to work with Mike. I mean, when I went to DS9, I was a little disappointed that I didn't have a starship. And I was in charge of all the Cardassian ops, all the graphics and ops.
Hi, Stewart.
Captain Stewie.
we had a dreadnought in our episode, and we called it the Foley class. And
oh, really?
In honor of Stewart, yeah.
I think he should be a Foley artist if he's going to have a name like that.
That's a fun thing to do. Maybe that's an adventure in movies for you.
To be a Foley artist?
Yeah.
I'd love to be an editor. If I had more time, I'd like to be an editor. And I'd love to go to wardrobe and design costumes.
There you go. Well, then maybe that'll be next.
Yeah. I need to ride off in the sunset with Donna.
You could kind of ghost design a costume for a fan film, and nobody would know you did it.
I know, but then that means I have to take the time to do it.
That's true.
And my time is short, everybody. I'm a short timer. Doug turned 70 in March.
Yeah, but Doug's like in great health and is all jacked. And
he's got 30 more years.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I see people vaporizing, left and right all over the place.
Listen, everybody knows that the Fountain of Youth is actually at the Granada, and you just got to keep drinking those margaritas. You stay around for a long time.
Since I lost Dorothy, my consumption of margaritas went up.
Oh man, it's a good margarita.
We went there for 30 years together, and I proposed to her there.
Yeah.
But I love this stuff, but there's a certain point where I have to take some time to go to Yosemite, go to New York with Donna. I've been writing my memoir, which really is going really amazingly well. I've got lots of stories. There'll be a lot of Star Trek in it, but it really covers my entire career,
Well, I told you I'll do some beaky babysitting, so there you go.
Well, that's really kind of you to do that. He's such a bully. I hate to put you in a position like that. He'll take over, You guys will go joyriding and smoking cigars and stuff like that.
That's right. Well, I'll teach him how to operate the top on the convertible. It'll be great.
But But you know,
you just want to live some life. You want your time in the sun.
well, you know, it's just that I want to take some time to just do some of the things I never did because I was always so busy, and not be getting notes on it. You know, I mean, it's like if you work in this business, you'll have a lot of people who can't draw a straight line telling you what to do. You know.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
I've been lucky because especially on Star Trek, where I'm very highly respected. You know, I mean, I did some stuff for TED, graphic stuff for like, you know, graphics is like easy for me. It's like falling off a log, but it could be difficult. You know, I mean, I was involved with a set. They had shot a set for a teenage girl's bedroom, and Seth didn't like the arrangement of the cutout magazine pages that kids put on the wall, and so he's having visual effects change the wall, put different, and so they called me back for reshoots, working with Steven, the production designer, about designing what would go on the wall and how it would be, and I got more notes on that teenage girl's wall than I did on 5 starships on Picard. So it can be very difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm more than happy to do it. It's my job to do whatever they want. But I need to take some time where I'm not dealing with notes from on high, you know.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir here, man.
You know.
I did a fan film that took me nearly 3 years to make, and it was weeks and weeks of notes and notes and notes, just editing a fan film, someone else's fan film. Now that fan film's winning awards all over the world, but it was 3 years of notes, and I was like, I don't know that I ever want to hear the word notes ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, if I'm on a show and I'm hired and the checks don't bounce, and I realize that my job is not to prove I'm a genius, it's to focus the boss's vision. Most of it ends up being you, especially if I'm on Star Trek, because, you know, Dave and Terry are like, you guys wrote the book. How do you think we should do it? That's awesome. But like, if I'm totally okay if I'm on a job and I'm being nitpicked over something that doesn't seem important to me, that I don't think anyone's ever going to see in a million years, but that's not up to me, you know, and they're paying me anyway. I'm there anyway. If you really want me to do this over 25 times, well, that's really actually your loss to have someone spinning their wheels over something that's so tiny, you know.
Because that's just hours getting billed.
Yeah. You know, but when I remember I was on Deep Space Nine, and like I had been through a few things and worked with some big names, and we had done these big panels in the Holosuite in Quarks, and there were these panels that a lot of the graphic was white, so it was just diffusion showing through. And I'm in the art department, and I get a call from stage saying, Marvin Rush wants you down here now. I'm like, what the hell? And I go down there, and he's standing by one of those big panels looking like this. And I walk up, and he goes and points to down near the floor, like a piece of dirt or something, like the size of a fly speck. It got trapped between the diffusion and I just like burst out laughing in his face. And I couldn't help it. And I just shook my head and I said, you know, Marvin, if they could see that, we all should just go home right now. And I think he was stunned. But the thing is that he wasn't dealing with your typical person. I'd been through a lot, you know. I've worked with really big names and things like that. And you're going to call me down here to yell at me about something that tiny. You know, are you really, you're going to have a scene in the holodeck where you're going to do a paint scraper on a panel? You're not. I think you just had a bad night last night or something and you want to pick on somebody. Yeah. And I'm just not in a position, wasn't in a position in my life where that would shake my world up. Not gonna happen. If Mike was upset with me about something, it would be important, you know, and I would take it seriously. But then when you do stuff like that, it's like I'm going to laugh at you, you know.
It was just some Kardashian fly that got through the transporter. Big deal. You know?
I mean, it's like, let's be real. You're a DP. You should know that's not going to be seen.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a makeup artist, I stunned him because he was the DP on TNG. And if I do a makeup, I want to look through the camera. I don't want to stand over here, and I want to see what you're seeing. And the first time I said I'd like to look through the lens, he was taken back by that. I don't think any of the other makeup artists ever did that. But, you know, I don't know how you can be sure that your makeup's going to look okay without seeing exactly what the DP's seeing through the camera lens, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember that startled him that I did that. Later on, Mike Westmore said, you just keep doing what you're doing. He says, you're looking out for my best interests. He appreciated it, you know. And the fact that I had the guts to do it, you know. Anyway.
These days, you could just look at the monitor, you know. But back then, people don't realize it wasn't the same thing back then. I mean, really, when you're shooting with film, that's a guess. You know, you're measuring, you're metering, and, you know.
Yeah, and they didn't have video assist at that point that I remember. I mean, video assist has actually been around for a long time. Just not everyone was using it yet. You know who invented video assist? Jerry Lewis.
Wow.
Sure did.
Okay.
Yeah. Jerry Lewis, people don't realize what a filmmaker he was. And as a matter of fact, when I was in like junior high school, there was a book in the school library called The Complete Filmmaker, written by Jerry Lewis. And I picked that up and I learned a lot from that. And yeah, video assist was something that he did. You know, it was like I Love Lucy, you know, with Ricky and Desi inventing, you know, shooting with 3 cameras and also setting up the sets like a railroad flat, you know, we could just move the equipment down, you know, which if you look at the original series Star Trek, it was set up like a sitcom set.
Yeah.
And it was all open on one side and you could move all of your equipment. You could shoot, you know, sick bay, examination room, and then just roll everything over and shoot McCoy's office and roll everything over and shoot the lab. You know, that was set up like an I Love Lucy set. Well, it was Desi Lou, you know. Yeah. Fascinating. You know, video assistance. Actually, the first time I ever saw playback on a set was we were working with Mike Nichols, who is one of the great directors and was a stand-up comedian for years. And we were doing a movie called Heartburn with Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep. And they had a video assist, not a video assist, but a laser disc recorder so that he could record every shot, every time they did a take. And after they would do a number of takes, Nichols, you know, he directed Catch 22. And I think The Graduate, I think he directed. So it was amazing to be on set with him. He'd call the whole crew over and we'd all watch the different scenes. And the one that got the biggest laughs, he'd go, okay, print that one. You know, but it was like, until you had that, you can't do that on stage.
He didn't have to wait for Telecini. He could just do it daily right there on the spot.
Yeah, it was amazing. Wow. It was really amazing.
You've probably seen the way things are done change so much.
Oh God, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I started in the business when everything had to be practical. If you had a bullet hit on somebody, you had to have a bullet hit on someone live. You know, if someone gets shot in the forehead, you need to put an appliance with blood tubes and squibs and hope that the squib goes off. I mean, I've been on movies where they set up the whole scene and then the squib didn't go. You know?
Oh, in film school, our course director, our 35 millimeter course director, they put the squib on him backwards. He was one of the actors in the scene. And when they set it off, he runs in, he's like, yo, the jig is up, so-and-so. And then they set off the squib. And you just see him go like this, and then he fell out of the frame, and he's just like, "Oh,
Oh man,
Jesus Christ! You know, he just
Real blood.
you know,
Real blood.
you saw what happened on Rust, you know, with the gun.
yeah.
I've been on sets where that's happened. I was on Manhunter with Michael Mann, and he wanted to use live ammunition in the woods.
Mm.
And as of a few years ago, that was still in court. That was dangerous, man. I think pellets passed through the wardrobe truck that night.
Right.
It's just a thing where it's like there's no reason to do that when you can, with what you can do in post now.
Well,
the gun should just be a non-functioning prop.
Well, I don't totally agree with that.
Yeah, no, I think it could jerk a little bit, but that's just me.
No, you're right, because actors don't respond to the gun firing the way people really do. There's a certain reaction where your eyes, you know, will close for a second that you're not even controlling. There's a certain respect and fear that goes with firing something that's really making a lot of noise and ejecting shells. That on Battlestar Galactica, all those gunfights were with you know, blanks. And you could see the actors responding like something nasty is going off right in front of their face. But when you're doing bullet hits, when you're firing a gun that it's all CG, they're not going to react the same way. And they're not going to treat the gun as much with respect. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, on DS9, some of the actors would have phaser rifles, and they'd be pointing at each other with the phaser rifle and not treating it like a weapon at all.
Right.
But when you have something that really makes a lot of noise, makes smoke, fire, the actors all of a sudden are acting like it's something dangerous. And really, when you think about it, how many people have been killed like that in the last 100 years?
3.
Infinitesimal.
Millions and millions of gunshots fired. Millions and millions and millions and millions.
It's like 3 or 4.
Just in the Matrix alone, that's why I always think it's funny when people pile on people say, "Oh, you should check everything and everything." It's like, yeah, you need people that are professionals, that are union professionals, that are doing it right and they're being double checked and whatever. But you can't leave that in the hands of the actors and the producers and the directors.
Well,
that really you got to give them a certain level of responsibility, but it really needs to be on the people it's supposed to be with. And then when they fire off machine guns that are doing 1,000 rounds a minute, it's like, you know, you can inspect every single shell, make sure every single. Come on, I mean, there's a level of, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you have to have the gun shouldn't have been handed to him by the first AD.
No.
The firearms expert should have been right. You know, I mean,
when somebody yells to you that it's a clear gun, it's the same thing as them saying, "Oh, we're rolling sound." You have to trust that that's what's going on.
I always tell people that if somebody hands me a gun and they open it and they show me nothing in there, they spin the barrel and then they close it and I take it, I open it again, even though I just saw it, because now I'm taking responsibility for it. It's my responsibility to look at it again and make sure that we weren't all imagining that it was empty. You know, I can't, if it was me, I can't take the I can't let that person have the responsibility for me hurting someone.
Right.
But there's a good reason to use guns that really fire blanks. And that it's a tragedy, you know, when like Brandon Lee, I guess. And that's a tragedy. But the safety record is unbelievable. And safety on motion picture sets is incredible.
Yeah.
There's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I feel safer than on a Hollywood's, even though it's a dangerous place. I mean, I've had lamps blow up in my face with glass stuck in my chin. You know, anything can happen. I've seen people fall through the ceilings of sets. You know, when John was on Quest for Fire, a lamp fell and killed a grip. Mm-hmm. It's very dangerous, but I just find that for the most part, movie sets are incredibly well organized, you know.
Well, I mean, a week after Rust happened, that I was DPing a Western with a rifle pointed in my face. Like a week later, I had right down the barrel of a lens, a dude had a rifle. You know, it's just like, and it was all fresh in our minds.
Yeah, but I mean, stuff like, you know, I had done movies where, you know, Year of the Dragon, Tony Lip gets shot in the forehead and we have to put an appliance on him. And it's all happening right there. And now it's like if you're going to do bullet hits on people, you can do it in a computer. I mean, we did lots of bullet hits on people on Battlestar Galactica that were all done in post. On the other hand, though, there's still a reaction. If a squib goes off on you, the reaction that person's going to have is, there's something
Especially if it's on
quite
back.
hacked.
Oh my goodness!
I can't believe we've done 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's pretty good. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to get off soon because my girlfriend's going to call me.
Well, and I don't want to keep you too long. I just want to say, we've gone almost 3 hours now, and it's been amazing.
Is anyone going to listen to us for 3 hours?
We haven't. Yeah. There have been people here the whole time. I mean, we've had a really good audience so far.
Thank you, by the way, people.
I just want to say what an honor it is that you would even do this,
Oh.
Doug. It really is a treat, and like I'm not exaggerating when I say that you're someone I really look up to. And Mike.
I don't take it for granted, believe me. And I come from the same place that you do.
Yeah, Sean was kind of talking about that with me the other day. He's like, guys like Doug, guys like Terry Metalis, they're just people like us that said, let's go do it. And Sean and I, as you know, we did something a few weeks ago that you got to hear about it, and
you were lucky to have Kevin Haney doing a makeup.
We were. He was so amazing.
He's one of the best in the business,
and he was so nice.
He's nuts too.
Well, he shows up and he does this amazing makeup on Sean. And then he was just like, "Oh, bring all the Klingons in."
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Did all the Klingons, did all the Romulans?
On my first job on The Hunger, that's where I met Kevin.
And we were on the Star Trek Continues sets shooting that. And we shot this great final battle scene between Sean playing the main through line bad guy and Tyler Dunivan, who was here earlier, playing our captain. And man, we had a great time. And it was just an honor to have such cool people care about our production. And really I felt like we punched above our weight a little bit having Sean there, because he really added so much to that production.
Thank you.
What's the name of your character that I love?
Kamak.
No, not the Klingon.
Oh. Which character? Which character?
Your private eye guy.
Oh, Sam Savage.
That's the first place I ever saw you, was Sam Savage.
Sam Savage, Private Eye. That's right.
And Sean has written, or he's in the process of writing a really neat Star Trek fan film take that we're going to do.
Yeah,
a completely independent story, and he told it to me a while ago, and it's really something. It's really right in line with Gene's vision, I think.
Yeah, it's a short. It's going to be about 5 minutes long, probably maybe 10 at the most, and it's based on a lot of the social issues we're going through today. And I can't go too much into it, but it's going to be really interesting. I'll tell you about it. Yeah.
Listen, guys, I'm going to have to go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing, being on our Avalon Universe channel. Hey, and Doug, if you ever get the time, watch our fan films. Fans have liked them. We've got nearly 2 million views on our channel. So
that's incredible.
And thank you, Beaky, for putting up with us for the last 3 hours.
He's a bully.
All right.
Dorothy was one of the only people that was able to, deal with him. As a matter of fact, and I got to make this short because I got to get off. She, if I wanted him to go in, he'd fight me. He'd get big and he'd be, And one day I came home and he was out. Dorothy had him out. And I go, Dorothy, you letting him out? She goes, yeah. Why wouldn't I? And I said, but what if you need to go out? And she says, how do you get him back in? And she says, I just ask him. He just like, let's go in. Honey, I have to go out. Would you please go in for mommy? Go right in. That's Dorothy, though.
Doug, we love Dorothy and we love you. And we'll see you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Have fun living that life and enjoy those retirement and trips that you so much deserve.
And say hi to Donna for me.
I will. I'm looking forward to you meeting her.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Doug. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, I'll see you later. Thanks a lot. 3 hours.
Okay.
Holy crap.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So with that, I want to thank everybody who's been here. It's been a long, probably our longest live stream we've ever done, but and we let Doug go pretty much the whole time, but that was the point. We wanted to hear all of the stories and all of the cool things that he had to talk about. Thanks to everyone for kind of letting us, start a little late. We had to kind of coordinate some tech issues with Doug, getting him on here, and he was just very gracious in coming and being a part of what we were doing. So we felt it was important to kind of give him a couple minutes. So we had some great people here. A lot of our regulars like Ed and people who've supported our production. We had Aaron Vanderclay in watching with us, and he had a comment just now. He's like one of the greatest fan filmmakers out there, a guy that I love, and I love all of his films. So, to all of you who took the time to be here, thank you. I'll be back with another AVA-LIVE in about a week. Next Wednesday, we're going to talk with my friend Dan Reynolds of Warp 66 Studios. And we're going to talk about not only his fan film journey, but also his neat story of how he became a video producer and the owner of a really neat TV station. And so lots of little wisdom to talk about there. And he's made a film called Doppelganger, and he's going to have a follow-up to that. And we'll be talking all about that. So just stay with us. One thing we're not doing right now is super chats. Since we have fan films on this channel, I'm kind of being careful about that. In lieu of like a super chat or something, our GoFundMe is still up. I probably will replace it with a different one that's just like a GoFundMe for post-production. We did meet our goal on that first GoFundMe. Thank you to everyone. But now we're moving into the post-production phase, so we'll probably have one for that. But Sean, thank you to you two setting this up. Like I said, it's just been an immense blessing for our fan film series to have you be a part of it, not just as an actor, but as a friend. I've had the 3-hour phone conversations with Sean, and he will talk for forever about the coolest stuff, telling me about his James Bond film that he wrote and the fan film that he wrote. And I think he needs to be James Bond. Honestly, I think we need to make a James Bond with him as James Bond. But and some original stuff that he's written. He's a really prolific writer, and cool stuff, cool ideas. So everyone, thanks for joining us, and of course, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.